This podcast is brought to you by PC component retailer and boutique builder Silverknight PCs. Use offer code BrokenSilicon to get 6% off everything on their website. And it is also brought to you by Ice Giant and their ProSiphon Elite cooler. It's also brought to you by CDKeyOffer.com that gets you great deals on Windows keys and other products. You can find links in the description and the proper offer codes for all of these sponsors, and we'll talk about them later. But for now, let's just get on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and it's funny. Before we started recording, we chatted for a bit, and the guest asked me if I had moved, and I said, yeah, and I've actually almost been here for 2 years, which is a shocking thought that it's been already almost 2 years since the last time he's been on, but I will waste no more time. Please introduce yourself.
All right, guys, how's it going? It's Jim from AdoredTV, and I'm back on the show again. As Tom just said, 2 years since the last one. It just seems unbelievable. And I realised that because of that, it's basically been the last year I have spent not really paying much attention to technology, to be honest with you. I've basically just been getting all my news through Twitter, I think. You know, that's where I got all my tech stuff this past year, and a bit, in fact. So it took me a little while to get up to speed, and one or two things I put to the back of my brain, and maybe I can remember it during the show.
Well, it's funny, though. You have been putting out a few more videos recently, and they're pretty much all related to either RDNA or, and it's hard to avoid not doing this every now and then, just deconstructing some of the marketing of Nvidia. It's so much fun. Sometimes I just get lost looking at their graphs and going, look how silly this is. I couldn't think of a better person to have on, even if you've been taking a break from it. But I mean, how have you been these past couple of years? It's been sporadic when you've been posting.
Yeah. I mean, basically, I did have something of a midlife crisis last year, and I just got to the point where I decided you really need to pull yourself together and concentrate on your own life rather than, running around and trying to concentrate on everybody else's lives. And sadly, YouTube had to go because it was consuming so much of my time. It really was. It's just incredible the amount of time I would put into that. And then constantly raising the bar as well just gets so exhausting after a while.
Well, and I think there's a tendency for people who do this to, whether they started as this or not, they eventually kind of become perfectionists, right? Like you notice what you've done wrong in this video, and you're like, and then once you notice, I could edit that, and then it turns into 8 hours of editing a video somehow.
And if you don't notice it, one of your viewers will notice it.
And they will. They will. So you got to go back and fix it.
The thing is, I find myself now, these last few videos, I can sort of instantly tell when I make a mistake in the video, and I know that somebody's going to call me out on it, but I just sort of think, okay, it's maybe a small thing. Like in the last one, or a couple of videos ago, I talked about Nvidia being on 4 nanometers, and the instant I said it, I thought, somebody's going to call me out on this.
It's a 5 nanometer family node. It's not really 4.
Yeah, basically. But I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to leave it. Anyway, and I was right. I got maybe 10, 20 people saying, come on, man, it's not actual 4 nanometers. It's just based on 5, which I had already said in the previous video.
Yeah, I know.
So, it's been a bit like that. I just tend to let one or two little things go now. I think it's probably better for the overall mental health if you do that.
Yeah, those are the comments that I find really annoy me a bit too, is when it's like, I can't believe you don't think AMD or, Nvidia does this with consumers, this. And it's like, I've done 3 videos just talking about that. I thought maybe we make this a 20-minute video instead of a 30-minute one and just not completely regurgitate everything every single time, guy. Come on.
Yeah, I know what you mean with that. But yeah, like I said, because of a lot of things that I wasn't really paying a huge amount of attention to, stuff like Zen 4 even, it didn't do anything for me. Yeah, I really didn't. It did nothing for me, to be honest. Raptor Lake, that's been a surprise to me, to be honest. If you remember, like, was it about a year ago?
You leaked some of the details
The
about
entire
that,
lineup, basically, yeah? That was about a year and a couple of months ago. I had the entire lineup. And I also had another leak from the same source, a very good source, which told me that Intel would get an extra 2 speed bins. Now I'm thinking, okay, Alder Lake was what, 5.3 gigahertz?
It's somewhere around there, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking 2 speed bins, that must mean 5.5. So I put down in that same video, it's going to be 5.5 gigahertz. And it turns out that they got 5.8, and there's a 6 gigahertz coming now as well, isn't there, for Raptor Lake? So,
yeah, I think I leaked its... I'm trying to remember off the top of my head when it comes out. I want to say it was like January 10th or 13th. It's on my Twitter somewhere. Yeah, that comes out pretty soon, I think almost literally 1 month from now.
Right, okay. So, I mean, if there's been any surprise to me, then it certainly looks like Intel has got some pretty nice clock speeds out of that. And saying that, though, I mean, Zen 4, I don't think anybody really expected those clock speeds either. So they've both like done really well on their nodes, at least.
Well, I have to ask you that, though. That's the funny thing is, I was always like kind of hearing Zen 4 is at least as big of an increase as Zen 3. And it is. It's about a Zen 3 single threading increase, arguably a little better, maybe. And then the multi-threading is actually a higher increase because they're boosting all of the core clocks way higher.
Yeah.
And they have AVX 512 and a few. And it seems like their hyper-threading is a bit more efficient this time once again.
Well, what's interesting about that, if I can just interrupt, is I got a leaked slide on Genoa-X, and when I saw it, I thought, no way are they getting that sort of extra performance out of it. But from what this slide said to me, Genoa-X is going to be like 30% faster than Genoa. And
I'll put a link in the description. I have it was a few slides, but I have something pretty similar on that I put out the Vcache leak, and I was very careful about what I said about the overall performance, because it's like I had a series of benchmarks, and it's like, well, I don't know if this is going to apply to everything, right? With Vcache, sometimes you get like a doubling of performance, and sometimes it's 1%. So I was very careful, but I was like, it seems like the Vcache with Zen 4 is going to be at least what we got out of it in an increase of Zen 3, right? I'm assuming you saw that, right?
And also because of the vastly increased clock speeds. I mean, these things aren't quite so power limited like the X series. So, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people might be surprised at just how fast Genoa-X is again. I mean, Intel are already in extreme trouble in the data center, and it doesn't look like things are going to be getting better for them next year, at least.
Well, yeah, let's keep talking about that. And I did have that as a subject to bring up eventually. I wouldn't mind just talking about that first. Like, an entire subject of mine was just, I think it's going to be a brutal 2023 for Intel against AMD. I just see nothing here. Like, they're going to have a 6 gigahertz chip, but they're already pulling. I mean, I have a Raptor Lake i7. That thing pulls 250 watts easily. The i5s pull 200. The i9s pull over 300. I don't know what a 6 gigahertz model is going to pull, but some of the leaks coming out now suggest it's actually a decent multi-core performance increase too. So the only way that's happening is if these are binged so well that they're like at a 400 watt.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to look very good at all compared to like a 7950 X3D.
Exactly.
And then as far as I can tell, that's all they got. That's all they got all year.
Yeah. I mean, we saw the large increase that the X3D, the 5800 X3D made, especially like in gaming. I don't know if they're going to get the same kind of increase this time around. I'm not sure about that. But yeah, I think, well, I mean, Intel are kind of in the lead again, even though they're throwing tons of power at that problem, I think it'll be pretty close on the desktop. I don't really think that it matters that much, to be honest with you, though, the desktop. It's the state of their data center, which is just, it's a farce. I mean, Sapphire Rapids, what is going on with that? Is that released yet? I mean,
it depends, who you ask at Intel, as always, right? But I mean, it's I think because I've only been paying attention to like RDNA and Lovelace lately, but I think if I remember right, Sapphire Rapids is supposed to like paper launch by the end of this month, and then their HEDT version is coming out Q2. And the people I've talked to, they insist it really is done. It really is coming out now. I understand why we doubt it, because it took them 2 years to actually release this dang thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what they got, and that's going to have to go up against 96 core Genoa-X and 128 core Bergamo
of course,
in the middle of next year. And then Emerald Rapids is
just
20% better,
same, isn't it? Yeah, it's more of the same. Is it even going to be 20% better? I'm not even sure about that.
It's like 4 extra cores, probably. Who's to say? Like it's, I don't know. And that's, and they're hoping to have turnout by middle of 2020. I'm trying to make sure, middle of 2024 against like Zen 5. But I don't know. I'm going to probably leak this in about a week. I'm hearing there's node issues, at Intel.
Yeah.
And I just don't know what happens to Intel if they have 64 core Emerald Rapids against like 192 to 256 core Zen 5.
Yeah.
And on desktop, Meteor Lake might actually, if it even comes out to desktop, it sounds like it's completely gutted. They might have nothing to fight Zen 5 for like half a year.
Well, Turin's 192 cores. I don't know if there's a
like a Bergamo follow-up. Yeah,
256 probably is, but Turin at 192 is gonna stomp all over anything that they've got for a long time. I think 2024 might be the start of the turnaround, but I haven't heard anything about node problems. But I don't think it's like 10 nanometer, but it's still like, I don't know if you've seen like their slide or remember, like they were like, we're going to hit Intel 4 and Intel 3 in 1 year, and then Angstrom, and then like they're acting like they're going to 2 nodes every year. And from what I'm hearing, it's like, it's not 10 nanometer issues, but I don't think they're doing that. No, I don't think so. I mean, if they have another 10 nanometer issue, then you might as well just pack up and forget about it. They cannot
That's what
survive.
Someone told me, by the way. He's like, if this comes even close to that, I mean, we're done.
Yeah, they're
like
done.
This cannot happen again.
No, they are absolutely done. Even though they're outsourcing quite a bit now to TSMC, which is no doubt going to help them. They need their own manufacturing.
But it's such a sunk cost. Just all of those fabs need to be running, or they're losing money. I don't know. I think from what I've at least leaked recently, it's like Arrow Lake looks like it could be cool, but that's like late 2024 next to Lunar Lake for mobile. And like, I think all of that sounds good. I actually do think Granite Rapids, which for those, it's like a Redwood Cove plus, supposed to come out first half of 2024 with 128 cores and all these accelerators.
Yeah,
I think all of those can be good if they come out on time, but I think if they slip even half a year each, it's such a bad 2023. Even if Intel comes back, I really think next year people are going to be looking at Intel like they're just done for, whether or not they actually are, because again, I'm kind of being repetitive here, but I think they've basically got nothing coming out next year effectively then. Like, right? Like nothing. If Meteor Lake gets delayed, that was it.
I mean, the thing is, they've been somewhat fortunate to hold on to something like 70-75% of the data center market. They still own all of that market with these awful products, but they are losing more and more and more every month. Yeah, I can't imagine anybody's really upgrading Intel servers anymore. They're switching over to AMD. It's been a glacial ramp for AMD. I mean, 2017 is when we got Zen 1. We're coming to 2023 now, and they've only got about, 30% of the data center market? It has been really, really slow.
But it's been pretty consistent, right? Yeah. And they are chipping away slowly but surely.
It's only going in one direction, put it that way, and I don't see the direction not going to be changing next year, that's for sure, and probably not 2024 either. And, this is where Intel's money comes from, or this is where it came from. And I had a look at their financials. That second quarter financial result they had.
Yeah.
I had, because I'd been out the game for like a year, I had absolutely no idea just how bad it had got for them financially.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, they're almost.
I think that snuck up on all of us a little bit, though. Like, we all expected horrible financials, but the losses they were getting out of AXG, their accelerated graphics division, and you know, in their last earnings, they openly admitted that they have worse margins than AMD already.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that to happen so quickly.
No. It almost just seemed like an overnight capitulation, almost. Like they sort of held on for a bit and then it just like, boom, the entire PC market just cratered like the past few months. But interestingly enough, I mean, Lisa Su said that AMD didn't notice anything during the second quarter. You know, they're still getting orders coming in. But then AMD got hammered like last quarter. So they've had like a sort of delayed effect with this. And obviously, one of the reasons for that is Intel has gone and basically fire saled a bunch of CPUs. AMD's been left with a ton of inventory, and they've had to then like drop prices. It's been great for us. I mean, a 5800X 3D for $329, something like that. I mean, that's fantastic.
Or, you know, like I've been talking about the Micro Center deals here, and it's gotten so absurd. It's like you can get what is it? I'm trying to remember. What are we on now? 7700X for like, it was like $350, and then they'll give you $50 off and $50 off a motherboard, and they gave you 32 gigabytes of RAM for free. Like, I was like, what?
Throwing tech
giving it away.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. The PC market has just completely crashed, and I mean, it's hurting Nvidia as well. Obviously, in graphics, everyone's hurting with it now. That's when the data center basically comes to the rescue. It's the data center that's come to AMD's rescue. It's shoring Intel up slightly, but they're losing more and more.
Well, that's the thing, though, right? And AMD has slowly but surely been taking market share. Slowly, probably because it was so many people were buying everything on the shelves. And if people buy everything you put on the shelves, then, well, Intel has capacity and they're going to keep market share.
Yeah.
But the second the market crashes, then it becomes a logical purchasing decision.
Yes.
They're like, well, AMD's better. I'm choosing AMD. And it's finally hitting Intel now that they got off so easy. And, you know, I will say, too, I really get the impression when I look back at the conversations I had with Intel, and they're almost surprised to what's happening now, that they really thought Alder Lake was all they needed to do. Like they thought, we won, we're done then, right? Everyone will just buy Intel forever again. And somewhat actually, to my surprise, Zen 3 continued to sell about as well as Alder Lake, and they have all this leftover inventory. They're going to rebrand a lot of Alder Lake dies into the 13th gen, like whatever it is, non-Ki 5s below $200 just to get rid of them. I really get the impression that Intel thought if they pulled off one win, their Mindshare would do the rest. But it is interesting to see how AMD's been able to take Mindshare with Ryzen in a way that they never could with graphics against Intel.
That is actually a very good point. Yeah, because even now, if I was buying a CPU, I mean, okay, the 13900K is like the fastest CPU out there, but I'm not putting something 250, 300 watts, and for a CPU, no chance. I would like lose a frame or two per second rather than stick that into my PC. So, I mean, they've achieved a win through basically throwing power at the problem. And, you know, like all the PC builders are looking at the same thing because, it was a bit cheaper as well. You've got to sort of say, you've got to applaud them, I guess, for keeping prices down and bringing AMD's prices back into check, because Zen 4 prices at launch were just stupid. Yeah, they should not have been priced so high. And I do think stupid, by the way, because I can make an argument for why they were fairly priced, but I don't want to regurgitate it. I could make the argument, and I actually think there is an argument to be made, but it doesn't matter when this is the first generation on a new socket. Like, price it lower and capture the socket market, and then everyone will upgrade for 5 years. Like, I don't know why they didn't see that. I mean, they've come around to it now, I think, but it was so weird to me that AMD seemed
very tepid to give you a decent bargain. If there was ever a generation to have a bargain, it's when Intel's competitive again and you have a new socket. So let's get people on the platform.
I mean, that was the thing. I mean, the cost of the motherboards was so high as well. It was just totally prohibitive looking at the overall system price. And I'm looking at it thinking, I cannot imagine that this is going to help AMD's market share at all. And well, as we know, last month it really did fall apart because Intel has fire saled a bunch of CPUs. AMD's had to massively drop prices just to shift inventory. And I mean, the whole PC market is in a really bad state and stuff like that has to happen. But the simple fact that they launched Zen 4 at such high prices, I don't think they read the market very well, to be honest.
I think AMD's failed to read the room on a few things.
Yeah, they have done. There's no doubt about that. I don't think they really expected Intel to be so fast either. I just, I get that feeling.
I have to conclude the same. I really think, which is odd because I don't think what me and you leaked about Raptor Lake seemed that outlandish. They're adding more little cores. They're clocking it faster. I don't know what AMD expected. It was about exactly what you'd expect out of something like this.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Zen 5 is probably going to be a bigger architecture change than what we saw with Zen 4. So there is that. I mean, you really can't do huge architecture changes year after year after year. There does come a sort of stage where you do milk it just that little bit. The same with graphics as well, which I guess we could move on to, seeing as obviously there has been a rather interesting release.
Yeah, we've been dancing around it now for a couple of minutes. I guess speaking of milking, let's talk about the next-gen graphics releases. Specifically, let's start, of course, with RDNA 3. I mean, I don't even know where to start, really, but what were you expecting out of RDNA 3? I don't know, maybe... Let's do this. What were you expecting 6 months ago, a month ago, and a week ago? Because my answers would be different.
Right. Well, yeah, obviously, especially this last week. As you know, as I said, I haven't been paying any attention to it. And anything I got came through Twitter. I would get something and put it to the back of my mind. And then actually, the thing that sort of piqued my interest was when I started to see images of Nvidia's new Lovelace graphics cards coming out and these humongous shrouds. And so...
Yeah, I'm holding one up here to the camera. This thing is insane. And I trust me, it's heavy. It's really heavy.
I mean, you can see that it looks heavy. I asked myself, why is Nvidia doing this? Now, obviously, they'd been on Samsung 8 nanometers, right? And we knew that they're moving on to TSMC 4 nanometers. Let's just call it 5 nanometers. And so, I mean, at the end of the Ampere, the last Ampere video I did, I said, you know what? Nvidia look like they're going to really, really hammer AMD into the ground next generation, simply because they're going from Samsung 8 to TSMC 5. It's going to be a huge increase they're going to get out of that in terms of power. And then all of a sudden, though, I start seeing these huge shrouds. And then realize that they're releasing their top-end GPU first with a massive shroud. And why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? Why do you think that? I mean, what would you analyze that as why NVIDIA did that?
Well, right. Well, and I did. I think that NVIDIA saw what happened with RDNA 2, and you could make the argument AMD won with RDNA 2. Certainly in some averages, the 6900 XT beat the 3090.
Yeah.
And Jensen is not happy about that. You can tell that they thought the 3090 was going to crush RDNA 2, and it didn't. And I think Jensen said, obviously these things are planned years ahead of time.
Yeah.
But he went... We're not giving them any chance here. And I'm actually going to do a leak about a week after this comes out about a canceled NVIDIA product that I have pictures of, that if you think that looks big, they had something. I can't. Well, maybe I'll send you pictures after this. It's comically huge. Well, I think Jensen said, we're going to push it and we're going to make sure we don't lose. And then at the last minute, they realized they don't need 600 watt graphics cards. And I mean, look, this thing... uses 300 watts. It doesn't need this cooler. And they've got a better dual slot cooler for the 4070 Ti. This could easily accepted. So I think they said we will not let AMD win. And I think they were more scared too. I mean, AMD just did this with RDNA 2. Now they're using chiplets. That's a scary word, like Macbeth, you don't say around AMD competitors. So I think they were scared and they're like, we cannot let them destroy us. And then
that was my analysis as well when I saw it. And obviously I'd heard about the 600 watt rumors stuff as well. And I'm thinking on the same node, this is the first time that Nvidia and AMD have been on the same node for quite a few generations now, at the same time. Was the last time Pascal? And what did they do with Pascal?
You'd say Nvidia maybe had a slight node advantage with Pascal because it was TSMC versus Global Foundries, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah, there was that. But Nvidia.
So I guess GCN and Maxwell, right? Like Fury and Maxwell. Those both
basically
TSMC
going back
28.
to 2011, between 2011 and 2015 probably was when they were all kind of on the same node at the same time. But Nvidia milked that. I mean, they milked like the 1080 Ti, the 1080, which was a very fast card, 30% faster than the previous generation. And then they brought out the Ti, which is an incredibly quick graphics card. But they made the most of that financially. By basically launching the 1080, what was it, $800 or something? Or
it got to $800 during the holiday season, above MSRP. The Founders was $700, and it was really people forget that it was above $700 for like 6 months or more until they were scared of Vega for no reason, apparently.
But now all of a sudden, as I was saying, they're both again on the same TSMC node. Nvidia are getting a bigger increase. Certainly in terms of power, moving from Samsung 8 to TSMC 5, that should have been a massive increase in power coming back for Nvidia. And yet they've got this massive shroud. They're launching their top-end chip. And their top-end chip, which, let's be honest, it's not really that far cut down. I mean, what is it, like 11%?
It's like 10% or something. Yeah, 11%.
Which doesn't leave them an awful lot of room to grow, to be honest. Although it is actually better than the 3090 Ti, I believe.
Well, yeah, I think they had to, though, with the 3090, because 3090, I think, was cut down like 3% when that came out or something. But they had to because, they just... they
had to milk it, yeah.
The Samsung just didn't give them the performance I think they quite thought it would get to. Surprise,
So my analysis was Nvidia are basically afraid of what AMD have got coming next, which I couldn't really fully understand. Because it just doesn't make sense to me. I thought Nvidia were going to stomp AMD into the dust. And well, maybe some people think that they did with the XTX launching yesterday. It's about 20 to 25%. Well, sorry, the 4090 is between 20-25% faster. Which is a generation, well, that is the difference between a top-end card and a mid-range card.
It's about the difference between a 2080 Super and a 2080 Ti.
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is not AMD's high-end. This is their mid-range. If you go back again, 14 nanometers, they launched Polaris. That was 2016. That was as square in the mid-range as you can possibly get. In fact, it was the lower mid-range, I would call that. And then 2017, they launched Vega, which, I've said enough about Vega in the past. I don't want to go over that again. And then with RDNA 1, the 5700 XT launched 2019. That is as square in the mid-range as you can possibly get a graphics card. 5700 XT, squarely in the mid-range. And then it was the year after, 2020, that they launched the 6800, the 6900, the bigger chips, which are basically had double the shader count. And so this year, once again, they've moved to they've done this every new node, right? 14 nanometers, they launch mid-range first. 7 nanometers, they launch mid-range first, if you don't count the Radeon 7, at least. And now we're on 5 nanometers, they are once again launching their mid-range chip. They've just called it the 7900 XTX, which is a marketing move which allows them to basically charge $1,000 for it.
Yeah, which it sold out, it did sell out and I thought it would. But I do know that, like, I don't know, somewhere between 40 to 20% of the volume right now is the XTX, and that's the one everyone wants. I don't think it's a big surprise that's sold out. It is interesting because I would I'm of two minds about the RDNA 3 launch. On the one hand, I think AMD wanted this to be better. There's no way around it. RDNA 3 was intended to be stronger than this. At least eventually, who knows, maybe they'll have, a fixed version and an overclocked version come out. I think they probably will. But at a minimum, I really think something clearly has gone wrong with the performance. Having said that, on paper, it's a 300 millimeter squared die competing with a, 390 millimeter squared 4 nanometer Lovelace 4080. I think the cost to make it's probably pretty close to a 4080. So all you can say is, even if it didn't pan out, I'm sure as well as AMD wanted it to, it isn't, it is competing with what it should based on its size, right?
Well, here's the thing, right? What I just talked about Nvidia going from Samsung 8 to TSMC 5, it's not like AMD didn't know that was going to happen. I mean, surely they've sat around the table, they've analysed it and said, Nvidia are going to get massive power. They're going to claw back a load of power on this. They're going to increase clock speeds. And then they're always going to have the option of launching the top-end chip first. Mm-hmm. How could AMD possibly beat that, moving from 7 nanometers to 5 nanometers with what is basically a 480 millimeter square chip? That's what it would be if this was an entire monolithic chip. It would be about 480. And yet they were only getting that small increase from 7 to 5, whereas Nvidia were moving from 8 to 5 and holding back, always having there's always a likelihood that they could launch this 600 square millimeter chip. When was the last time Nvidia didn't have a chip that size? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've always had 600 plus. How is AMD supposed to compete with this? And yet, if you look at it, they're only 25% behind. People are upset with XTX, right? But if you compare,
well, and I mean, I think that no matter if a better thing comes out, if the drivers improve, if a stronger card comes out, AMD lied about its performance, just straight up. Which was crazy when they've been so honest with the previous pre-release information. That's what really angered me yesterday. So it's just like, but you did lie, though. You just completely lied. And I don't think they needed to.
70% is what they said. I analysed it, and I said that I would go err on the side of caution in like a couple of videos ago, and I went for the 55% faster mark.
That's about what I thought. I think I thought 58. Something like that.
And it looks like they've maybe hit about 40%, if that. Here's the thing, though. It still ended up around about where I thought it would be relative to the 4090. The big problem here for AMD was the 4080 performed better than I think anyone was expecting. I mean, if you look at the shader count compared to the 4090, it's down, about 70% or something. How is that card only like 30% behind? That didn't add up to me.
I will say, though, well, I guess, I think it's like 30% behind, but if you go the other way, and so it's like the 4090 is like 35% better.
Yeah.
I guess actually to add on to what you're saying, the only thing I could suggest is NVIDIA has talked about this. The CUDA cores in the 4090, the 8102 die that the 4090 uses are closer together. They intentionally made them denser packed cores. Like, because it was more of a compute focused top chip, and they always intended to cut it down, is what they say, right?
I mean, I think it surprised everyone, the 4080's performance, certainly me. And I did say in the video that I expect the XTX to come in between the 4090 and the 4080. Now, sadly, it is a lot closer to the 4080, but my analysis of that was off simply because the 4080 was so much faster than what I expected. It's come in about 20. The 4090 is about 25% faster than the XTX. That's what I analysed it as after AMD's reveal. And that's when I thought, well, if they do have a larger chip next year, they can certainly put this to the sword easily. But then the 4080 is 15% faster than I expected it to be. I mean, that's how much faster that card was. So I think a lot of the problem is AMD probably expected the 4080 to be a bit further behind than what it ended up. And I think a lot of AMD fans probably thought that. So it looks disappointing. The XTX looks disappointing when you compare it to the 4080. But if you compare it to the 4090, it actually looks pretty good. Yeah, Nvidia 25% faster with a 25% larger die size or something like that. You know, in terms of like the competition between the companies, it has never been closer. Not since probably Hawaii launched like the 290 and the 290X in 2015. This is as close as both companies have been on like a tech level since that time, I would say.
So, but the thing is, though, then the 4090 also has all these other things, though. It's like, if we're talking raw raster, yes, but in some of these ray tracing benchmarks, it's a complete bloodbath.
Yeah.
Like to a point that, again, it's almost like something's wrong here. But like, I don't understand what's going on with AMD.
But if you consider that it is basically double the chip, then, you know, if you doubled AMD's ray tracing performance right now, it would be pretty close. I mean, it's still going to lose. But they would win in stuff like Far Cry.
I do agree, though. I think that at a minimum, though, you can't really say that it's a utter failure in like terms of what they've gotten out of the silicon. I think it's just clearly, which is so funny, right? I think I'm trying to remember what I said, and someone's brought this up on the Discord or something. Like they're like the amount of silicon on the 7900 XTX suggests it should be like 40% better or whatever it was, you know, than the 4080, and it's only like 10%. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, half of that silicon 6 nanometer, man. Yeah, basically. Like, come on. Like, they still are like at a pretty notable node disadvantage here, and yet they've managed to, you know, like you're saying, get that close. I think it's obvious they thought it would be better, though, like from their marketing, and you know, this is where I just say from what they told me. I mean, one of my best Lovelace performance leaks came from their estimations within AMD based on what they knew about what Nvidia was making. Right. I think you're aware that like some of your best Intel or AMD leaks have come from the competition. Yeah, like this happens. And when they told me this a year ago, these are the same people who like got me Bergamo code names, accurate Lovelace performance. They said, we think we're going to beat them. They really thought they were going to be, I would say, they thought at a minimum they were going to be 50% better than a 6900 XT. But then when Vcache came around, they said, I think, you know, they thought they were going to be 80% better. And something, I think, clearly went wrong then, right? Because in the past month, it's gone kind of like, oh, never mind. We're not sure what's going on anymore. And I don't know. It's hard to balance this thing of like, on the one hand, I think it's clear AMD has a successful future still. On the other hand, I really think they botched what this launch is. I think their future's fine. You know, there's already people probably going, is AMD screwed? I don't think so, but I really do think they've screwed up a few things here.
Well, what I will say is, as I just mentioned, Nvidia moving from 8 to 5 and using their largest GPU. And I asked myself why. And the simple answer to that now is they had to, because the 4080 AD103 cannot beat the XTX. So NVIDIA had to launch their biggest graphics card, the biggest chip, or they would have lost this generation already. Yeah, and there's the answer to why they did, because they had to. Now, I can believe that AMD thought that they would beat NVIDIA had NVIDIA launched AD103, because they would have won that one. And yes, I do think there is maybe one or two bugs in RDNA 3 that need to be ironed out. I think the way that they've launched the cards with the reference cooler, we'll get to that in a bit, yeah, because obviously you and I have seen something very, very interesting today regarding the XTX.
What these cards are really capable of. But yeah, I think let's keep going on with the future stuff first.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, I think NVIDIA had to launch, well, they did have to launch that, you know, that chip. So they've known something, obviously. whether or not AMD realistically believed that they could beat AD 102, I just can't. Even with chiplets, I just don't see they're not throwing enough silicon at this problem. Yeah.
Well, remember though, they can go up to 192 megabytes of B cache by stacking another 96, and I mean that takes design time, design costs, and you have to do stuff to get that to support it, and they haven't done that yet. So it almost feels like they realized, oh, it's not performing like we thought it would, so we're also not going to add that extra silicon for Vcache because it's just not going to be able to utilize it. So I do think it's clear, though, they literally could have had a better version of this out today. If I assume, right, they could have put more Vcache, they could have clocked it faster, but clearly something's off where they don't think it's worth it yet.
Yeah.
This holiday season, I was conscripted by my girlfriend's family to build her sister her first gaming PC. And I'm pretty excited about how it is turning out with an i5 12600K, RX 6700 10GB, and of course, Windows 11 Professional that was bought from cdkeyoffer.com for a reasonable price. This piece of content is brought to you by cdkeyoffer.com and their Christmas sales event. cdkeyoffer.com is a long-term sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead for a reason. They've been good to me, my friends, my family, and of course the entire Moore's Law is Dead community for years. And honestly, they're just easy to work with, and they keep reliably providing me and everyone I know with a product that I honestly think PC gaming needs. Fair pricing on Microsoft software and other products. And that includes Microsoft Office Professional 2021 that I'm excited to surprise my girlfriend's sister with the knowledge that her PC will come pre-installed with Microsoft Office 2021 Professional. And it's because it wasn't that expensive to get from cdkeyoffer.com. If you need reasonable pricing on Microsoft software this holiday season, and I would assume anyone building a PC this Christmas does, then make sure you use offer code Broken Silicon for 25% off software, Moore's Law for 10% off physical products that they sell from their website now, and Die Shrink for 3% off everything else. Using these offer codes really does help Moore's Law is Dead a lot, and it helps you save money. Go to cdkeyoffer.com today.
Well, one of the leaks I talked about over at Astronomics, apparently, was it Sky Juice or whatever? He's got some
on Twitter, yeah.
He's getting some really, really good information, and his information on that was it wasn't worth the cost benefit analysis just wasn't there. And well, I guess we might as well talk about what we saw over at Tech Power Up and their Asus TUF XTX review. Clearly, there's an awful lot.
So just to recap here, this was something I always heard too, that what I always heard is a certain level of performance, and AMD was considering pushing the cards to 400 watts. Lately, they mostly were talking about efficiency, and that's really only going to use a little more energy than last gen, which has happened with the 355 watt card. But I always heard, no, but it can still hit 3 gigahertz. There's been a lot of arguing online. Oh, is there a clock speed flaw? And people told me, well, there's flaws, but it's not clock speed. It hits 3 gigahertz. And well, today, as of the day we're recording, Tech Power Up put out an overclocking benchmark that shows 3.2 gigahertz and a 10 to 15% performance gain on models that I don't even think are the top models yet. I know Sapphire's got a 420 watt model coming out or something. So it seems obvious that if AMD wanted to, they could have gotten really close to the 4090 if they were willing to use 400 watts, but they just didn't.
Just look at that, the benchmark that Tech Power Up showed, showing, was it Control? No, sorry, it was Cyberpunk, was it? Cyberpunk 2077, where it essentially ties the 4090. Now, it's that RDNA 3 is actually doing quite well in Cyberpunk, but still, they are basically tied with the 4090 with an overclocked XTX at 3.2 gigahertz. And they're still slightly less power than that. Now, normally when you overclock a card to that sort of extent, the power just runs away. I was expecting maybe 500 watts or something like that crazy when you overclock these things. But it's still less power for very, very slightly less performance than the 4090. So the silicon must be pretty good. Which brings me back to the point that you mentioned as well. Why did AMD launch this reference cooler, which is like 2.5 gigahertz, when there is so much more capable in the silicon? I have asked myself this question for years now. Why does AMD keep doing this? You've got to remember, though, they have actually really have, it's a good-looking shroud. It's triple fan. It's not one of those dumb blowers. And it's capable of 355 watts dissipation or whatever, 300 watts dissipation. So they have ramped up their game. The thing is, Nvidia are just ramping it up more and more all the time. These Founder Editions, these are actual good cards. I mean, you would never buy an XTX reference edition. Let's be honest, you just wouldn't do it. Yeah, but you'd happily buy a Founders Edition Nvidia. Because
they're sought after because they are higher quality.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the problem that AMD has had here. They could easily have launched a 3 gigahertz XTX reference had they had NVIDIA's Founders Edition shroud to stick on top of it. Yeah, and that would have been their reference at 3 gigahertz. And it would have been maybe 10%, 5-10% slower than the 4090. And people would be losing their minds at $1,000. Yeah. So, which another thing, I guess, look at the prices. I mean, the 4080 surprised me with its performance, but I didn't actually realize just how out to lunch that $1,200 was until I saw it.
I hated the 4080 when I reviewed it. I'm like, this is just such a hilariously silly card to get. I can't figure it out.
$1,200. I mean, the thing is, we saw that thing, I think Video Cards released a slide showing the price of the 1080 and then the 2080 and then the 3080, and then all of a sudden you're paying another $600 or $500 this 4080. It made no sense. So the pricing is just shockingly bad there. But now AMD, with their mid-range card, is coming out okay, it's faster than the 4080, slightly faster in raster and more slower in ray tracing. But to even think that $200 less is a good deal, and yeah, sure, they're selling out right now, but $1,000 for that card, that is just completely out to lunch. And AMD had a really, really good chance here. They could have charged $700 for that card, yeah? People would be losing their minds on that again. And AMD would be making money. And they would be selling more cards. And they'd be gaining mindshare. But instead, at $1,000, people are actually now saying the 4080 looks like good value.
I don't know. I don't know how they do this because, from my understanding, do with it what you will. What's going on right now is, and I actually got this from someone while I was recording my video last night, responding to the release. I was told out of nowhere they're expecting the driver team at Radeon to work over the holidays. Yeah. They do not like what's happened. They are going to work around the clock to try to fix some of these bizarrely inconsistent performance. There is a performance issue, whether it's drivers or some hardware flaw, when you have benchmarks where the 61 teraflop 7900 XT is 5% better than the 6950 XT. Yeah. Something is wrong here, guys. And they're going to try to fix it. But what I read into this pricing and naming is they're not 100% sure how much they can fix it, because if they were, they would have launched what they're calling the 7900 XT. They would have called it the 7800 and made it 650, and they would have called the other one the 7800 XT and made it, I don't know, 800, and then they would have had a $1,200 7900 XT that goes toe to toe with the 4090 if they were sure they could do it, and they would have took a ton of mind share if they did that. But I just feel number one, they aren't quite sure how much performance they're going to scrape back when they fix whatever's going on right now. And number two, I don't know. They're just so indecisive. It's they knew they had them on price. We know, and speaking of Angstrom, I've said this, he's said this, the Navi 31 configuration costs substantially less to make than the 4090, possibly the same or less than a 4080. They could have just won on pricing, but it's they didn't know what they wanted to do. And now that they've launched these cards that are 10% weaker than they need to be, with dumb naming at prices that we know is maybe better than what Nvidia is doing, but is it? They really could have had such a big win here because the technology itself is impressive, and it's just so frustrating.
Well, one of the problems with having lower prices, like I just suggested, had the XTX cost $700, yeah, we'd all be losing our minds over it. However, then underneath that, you've got your 7800 XTX, which would have to cost about $400. Whereas they're going to probably want to charge $650, $700 for the 7800 XT. And that's one of the problems with lowering prices. You've got to lower everything below it. And I believe that Navi 32, the 7800 XT or XTX, whatever they call it, is going to be a very, very nice card. Because, yeah, you can stick a 300 watt cooler on that, and it will probably be 3 gigahertz plus out the box.
Yeah.
And it will
well, let me jump in here then, right? Because Billy Mays writes in, oh, wow. And he says, hello, Tom and Jim. On Broken Silicon 182, Tom mentioned that he thought Navi 32, if it was used in the 7800 XT, should be able to beat the 4080 12GB that is now going to become the 4070 Ti.
Yeah.
After the launch of Navi 31, do you still feel this way? Because I must admit that, well, I don't think this lineup is a disaster. I'm still a bit disappointed, and my expectations have dropped across the board. And I sent you this before we started recording. I actually looked at where Navi 32 should fall, based on, 3,840 stream processors, 256-bit instead of 384-bit. And I concluded, just kind of averaging out the bandwidth and teraflops difference, that honestly, I think that even if it was at the same clock speed, same RAM, I think this should be, do the math. It's 2/3.
Yeah.
I think it of a 7900 XTX, I think it still comes around a 3080. And the if they can have it at 3.2 gigahertz or even just 3 gigahertz, if they can keep it there with a 300 watt cooler or even 250 watt, let's be honest, and they can give it even faster memory, which 24 gigabits on the market, I see no reason why this couldn't perform. I think, what did I estimate it, around a 3090, maybe 10 to 20% worse than the and that's still because of how badly priced Lovelace is. I think that still puts it about at a 4070 Ti or a little higher in performance.
It won't be far
on
behind.
Average.
Yeah, it won't be far behind. I mean, I now would fully expect 3 gigahertz from that card, at least. Yeah,
and there's rumors that's going to happen. I agree.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, the AMD slide makes sense when it said that architected to exceed 3 gigahertz. Yeah. This is this is the segment that I would typically buy. I would always buy the mid-range or the card below rather than buying the total top end for various reasons. Simply put, I am not going to spend $1,600 on a graphics card of any description. But also, I don't want that amount of power in my PC. I just don't want the heating up my room and the noise. So I always bought the mid-range, which is kind of, the lines are blurred slightly now. But yeah, I would expect the 7800 XTX would be the card that I would be most interested in. It will perform pretty close, I think, to the 4070 Ti. I
think even in a worst case scenario, it's going to be pretty close.
Yeah, it'll be pretty close. The problem is $700 for that. I just don't think that I want to pay $700 for that.
Because that's what they're going to do, right? It's going to be a $700 7800 XT.
Yeah, if we're lucky. I mean, looking at the 7900 XT non-X at $900, I don't get that. That makes no sense to me. Looking at the benchmarks, why is this only $100 cheaper? Unless they're trying to, make because they won't have a gap.
Volume's the XT, an overwhelming majority of it. So doesn't seem completely like an upsell, unlike with the 4090, where they have shipped more 4090s than 4080s.
Yeah.
You could argue the 4080 is provably an upsell to the 4090, but if they're shipping, if 2/3 of the shipments for Navi 31 are the weaker card, it is bizarre to me that it isn't at least $800. I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously Navi 31, the XTX is the entire die, yeah? So there's no cutting that down. And it must be cherry-picked dies to a certain extent, obviously, because obviously there is a power problem there. The AMD seem to have pretty high power. This is the one and only disappointment for me for Navi 31. is the power that it's drawing.
They said it would have a 54% efficiency increase. I'm not seeing it, AMD. I don't know where that is. Like, something's wrong here.
But if the 7800 XTX is 54% more power efficient, then they can then say, well, no, we didn't lie because we meant this card instead. Which is what I think they will do. Especially if, it comes in at 3 gigahertz. It's close. It's going to be close to the 4012 gigabyte or the 4070 Ti. Probably cost $100 less or something like that, depending on what Nvidia think they can get away with. It'll be a good card, but I think it's still. I just don't like these prices. I just can't get my head around how much graphics cards have increased in price over the last 5 years or so. It's just got silly. Like, almost double the cost. 1080 Ti was $699, wasn't it? $700 or something for a
it was.
And even then we thought, these prices are just getting a little bit high now. But then with Turing, it just went insane. And then AMD followed with, basically they followed with Navi.
Actually, let me make this argument to you, because I've said it on my podcast before, but I haven't talked to you about it. I actually make the argument that Lovelace, although the 4080 is absurd, they clearly someone, I don't know what they were thinking, and they can't sell the thing. I'm not surprised. But I would make the thank God, because I think you would agree. Me and you just assume everything will sell. I think that there's an argument to be made that really what we're seeing out of Nvidia is the worst of everything they've done before at the same time. But it's really nothing new. I mean, the 680 was a 104 die for 500, and there were people that complained a decade ago about that. And then they launched the, if we're not talking about a second gen of Kepler, let's just skip right ahead. So that's $500 for the 104 die with Kepler. Then moved to Maxwell. Now it's $550 for the 104 die with Maxwell. Let's move to Pascal. Now it's $700 for the 104 die with Pascal. Now let's move to Turing. Now it's $800 for the 104 die. And now we move to Ampere. That's kind of a fluke because they were using a cheaper node that had issues. But now move to $1,200. I would make the argument the biggest I actually looked into this. The biggest increase was Pascal. And everyone lost their fucking minds over a $700 104 die. And people get mad at me when I point this out, but everyone bought the 1080 for $700. So that's why we have a $1,200 4080. Especially if you adjust for inflation, like, this is just a linear straight line to $1,200. They were always trying to get there. Yeah.
I mean, luckily it's not selling, or it appears not to be selling. So obviously their own buyers have said, this is enough, and it is enough, because this is how people buy. People who are looking at the 4080 probably had a 2080 or a 1080. More likely, they had a 1080, which they paid $700, maybe $800 for, but they're now being asked to pay another 50% on top of that. And it's maybe 3-4 years later, but people still remember what they paid for that graphics card. And nobody's wages have gone up by 50% in the past 5 years, but the cost of the graphics cards have.
It's funny. On the last Broken Silicon with my co-host Dan, someone asked a question about inflation, or it was either that or Daishin, I can't remember. And they said, because of inflation, do you think this is this and this is acceptable? And Dan said, I don't think anyone says, my chicken costs 30% more. That means the 4080 can cost more. I think, in fact, it probably means the opposite. They're like, I'm not going to be able to afford a 4080.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because nobody's wages went up by 30% either. Sure, everything is getting more and more expensive. The new nodes are more and more expensive. But when they're telling us that the reason these cards cost so much is because the cost of the node, it's just nonsense, yeah? You just need to look at their bottom line and see that both companies are now making a fortune. Even
right. I can accept, like, the high end used to be 500. I can accept it being 700 or 800. I can accept the insane, liquid cooled, ultra pushed 4090 being like a 1200 or something. But when you make the 4080 $1,200, it's not 700.
It's completely in a different market segment, and it's out of the reach of many people. I never really liked looking at Nvidia launching the Titans and stuff, and the prices going to 1,500, 2,000. But at least it was the high end. This was the very best of the very best that you could get. And I wasn't buying it anyway. So, but now that I am actually, finding myself in this situation where, as a mid-range buyer, and I'm looking at the pricing going up the same way, it's gone the same way.
Mm-hmm.
How long? If Nvidia get away with selling 4080s at $1,200, then the 5080 is going to be $1,500. They're not going to go.
But they didn't, right? I think what we're learning is that as much as you can, and let's be honest, they probably should have charged $2,000 for the 4090.
Yeah, they should have done.
As much as we're learning, they can totally have a card that's $15,000 to $2,000 as long as it does something that makes it special, which the performance is absurd with the 4090, I would say. Okay, but I think it's clear that it's going to be hard to get consumers to accept the high end being over $1,000 and the mid range being over like 600. But they're still trying to. Would you agree that it seems like we're finding the limits though? Like even if people accept the flagship being $2,000, they're just not going to accept the mid range being 1,000.
I mean, in the end, it comes down to how many wafers and how many chips that they're going to be making, and then how many cards they're hoping to sell. If the 4080 doesn't sell, they're going to have to drop prices. There's already been talk of like small price drops, nothing dramatic. Looking at the XTX, Nvidia probably thinks that they don't need to drop prices. The thing here is, right?
It just depends, like how much of the dies they'll send a laptop, how much of the capacity they can just go, we'll just switch all capacity to the 4090, and how much they care about how much stock's sitting on shelves. I would argue they have no reason to cut the price until the existing shipments of the 4080 sell out. They can wait months for that to happen.
Well, that's another thing. This is how graphics cards are released now. It's almost like early access on Steam kind of thing. Yeah, they launch in such low volume. You're very lucky to get hold of one. Demand is massive. And this has been for every card apart from the 4080. So I think, maybe now this is finally Nvidia buyers saying, absolutely not. I am not.
There is a limit. Yeah. Like even Polaris, if you'll remember, the RX 480 sold out. That was hard to get for like a week or so. Yeah. Like it's usual things sell out at first. It's weird this didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay, we talked about the downturn in PC and how the market's cratered, which is obviously not helping. People are holding on to their money for obvious reasons. So maybe, Nvidia possibly misread that as well, because honestly, $1,200 for a 4080? Nah, I just don't think so. Absolutely not.
Let me ask you this. Where do you think the 4070 Ti is going to be, assuming it is literally just the 4080 12 gigabyte? Because I think there's some people suggesting $900. What I'm told, Nvidia has not decided the price yet, at least not as of like last week. I guess I haven't asked today, because I do think they were waiting to see what happens with RDNA 3 before deciding the price. Like that's common sense, but it's coming out January 5th. Like, do you think it's 800? And I think it's like what, the 25-30% weaker than the 4080, puts it around a 3080 Ti or something. Do you think they're going to do 800?
It's just 700. It's going to lose to the XT though, yeah. So the 17800 XT is just going to be that little bit faster, I think. Which I guess it kind of means that it has to be about 800. I think
it's kind of what my gut says is if they make it 800. They can say, well, we're within like 10%. Sure, we have almost half the RAM, but it's $800. And do you think it'll sell at 800 though? Because I still sit here and I go, they tried to make it 900. Now maybe they'll try to make it 800. I think at 900, it sells as badly as the 4080.
Yeah.
I don't see and I've seen people argue with me and I'm like, they unlaunched it because if they actually kept 900, the amount of tone deafness they would appear to have of like, it'd be I really think 900, no one buys it. I suspect 800 isn't going to be a big seller either. I think it has to be 750. If I was Nvidia and I wanted to move them, that's where I'd just put it barely where I think it will move. And I think 700 or lower would actually sell.
See, the big problem is we simply don't know how much product they're going to have. I mean, how is this ramp going at TSMC 5 nanometers? How many wafers have they bought?
They bought more than before. So they have an absurd, they have an absurd. Lovelace was an architecture designed for a booming market where everything you make sells. It's expensive to make. They bought up a bunch of TSMC capacity. So it's sitting there. They have to do something with it. Now, the thing is, the 104 die you can ship to laptop, though, right? If you need to.
Yeah.
But I do know that they have a ton of volume on eventually. Maybe not at launch, but they've bought this capacity.
Sooner or later, it's gonna be seen in the financials. Yeah, if they're not selling, they need to drop prices. It's that simple, which is gonna cut their margins a bit. Maybe their shareholders will look at it and say, well, we're in the middle of a really bad period for the PC. But Nvidia has, quarter after quarter after quarter, they just reeled the money in more and more and more and more and more. And then it just came to a crashing halt last quarter for them, down like $1 billion or something like in gaming. And obviously, one of the reasons for that is the arse fell out of the mining market. Now, there's no mining market worth anything.
Oh, I know. When I see these miners say, I'm going to hold on to my cards until the next bull run, I'm like, okay, dude. Like, even if there is another one, which there certainly eventually could be, what if that's in 5 years? You really think people are going to buy your 3070 for MSRP in 5 years, even if there is a new shitcoin to mine? I mean, come on, dude.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's just denial. Like the mining ship has sailed for the foreseeable future, I would say, at least. So, yeah, Nvidia's losing a lot of money on that. And it looks like they have felt that the only way to make that money back is on gamers at higher prices. In the end, I mean, look, they're right to try it, I guess. You can say they might as well try. But in the end, they need to react to how the cards are selling. And if they're not selling, they're going to need to drop the prices. I think AMD will drop prices on the XTX and the XT before too long. I think that $1,000 for that is just too much. And certainly $900 for the XT makes no sense to me whatsoever. If Nvidia drops prices a little bit, then I think AMD will need to drop as well.
Yeah, I think maybe that's what AMD is waiting for too. Like for Nvidia to make the first move with the 4080, because AMD certainly has room to drop prices. The AMD's chiplets, the deals they have going with TSMC, they really have a pricing advantage right now versus their competition. But I guess, so I think none of that's going to happen in the next month, though. I think we need to understand that, like, what they've shipped has shipped. Chinese New Year's coming, that's going to shut down factories. I think both companies are likely to be in a holding pattern for a couple months. And then if the sales really do fall off a cliff after the holiday season, that's when they sit down, look at competition, the reviews, the volume that they have left to sell. And that's when they're going to do a comprehensive push. I don't think it's going to be like we don't know, I guess we'll drop the price $50 here. I think they're going to say, we know this is our issue. All right, we're launching this card. We're dropping the price on this card. We're doing this new big driver initiative. Here comes the FSR3 marketing blitz. Like, I think they're both going to probably do that around February. That's kind of my suspicion. But that's when they'll do it. Like, they can't drop the price quite yet. It would be ridiculous, I think.
I guess on a kind of similar topic, CES is coming up, obviously, next month. What's being launched at CES? Because they've just launched the RDNA, RDNA 3. They launched the N4, what was it, October? I mean, what's really coming up at CES? Normally, this close to the year, they would have held off. Yeah? They would have held off RDNA 3.
I know, and there are two things there, but I want to answer your question directly, but let me say this. Number one, I think AMD should have launched RDNA 3 next year. I think what they've done with this weird, bizarre, delayed launch with driver issues, it honestly reminds me of the other 7000 series, the 7970, that they did a controlled paper launch end of December, and it was really out in January because the drivers weren't ready.
Yeah.
For some reason, they didn't do that this time, and now they've shot themselves in the foot. And I know NVIDIA's launching the 4070 Ti January 5th, so that's CES, and I think they're doing it January 5th because they waited as long as possible to not ship these warehouses of dies they have. And the amount of people that are mad about this, by the way, I'm told two things. Number one, reviewers are furious because they're like, so the day I get back from New Year's Eve, I've got to cram this stupid review. And then number two, AIBs are furious because they're paying to ship the cards, which is going to go into their financials, but they're not going to get the revenue until the next. So no one launches things in the beginning of January.
Yeah.
You do it first half of December at the latest, and then you wait till February.
Yeah.
And so it's a weird CES. We're going to have the 4070 Ti, AMD Phoenix, which I think is going to be the star of the show. And then we're also going to have the i9KS. I'm trying to remember, and they'll show off Raptor Lake Mobile, I'm sure too. And I'm trying to think if there's anything. And then, I would imagine there's going to be some server stuff they show off. They'll probably make a big deal about Sapphire Rapids and Genoa as well.
Yeah.
The wild card is if AMD reveals X3D yet.
Yeah.
Which I also hear the non-X launches January 3rd. I don't even know if I've said that publicly. So all of that. So I actually think this is going to be like the most packed January.
Yeah.
I think I've ever seen, actually.
Well, it's good, I guess, from my perspective. It's, as you said at the beginning of the program, I've been releasing a few more videos. I had hoped to have one or two out like this month as well, but things got in the way of it, and then I knew that obviously RDNA 3 is coming. I will be releasing at least one, probably two, maybe even 3 videos on that. But it's always good for us guys, at least, to have like plenty to talk about. So
I know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I finished a video at like 2 a.m. yesterday. Now I'm recording a podcast, and I've got like 3 more videos I'm going to try to get out. And then it's like, I think I'm just going to hibernate for 2 weeks before I pop up. And January is going to be, I don't see it slowing down, I guess is what I'm saying. The news here.
Well, I'm at the stage where I'm basically making the spreadsheets based on like the results. And one of the things is about the XTX, I have had a look at maybe 10 websites, I just don't really see why people are so upset with this, I guess. And I'm looking at it, obviously, from an architectural standpoint, which is what I tend to do as well. The pricing thing, obviously, we talked about that. Neither of us like the prices, but I really, really like RDNA 3 for a bunch of reasons. I think it's going to be great next year. Yeah, or RDNA 4 is likely to be extremely good based on what I can see of this. So, I mean, yeah, people are upset that it didn't beat the 4080 by that much, but you know what? It's
by as much as they said it would.
Yeah, by as much as they said it would. I guess that part there hasn't helped either. The fact that they did miss.
For me, that really is what it comes down to. Is it's like, no, and I said this in my video last night, like, I don't think any reasonable person looks at a list of benchmarks. The lowest one you have is times 1.5, and the average is lower, like notably lower than that.
Yeah.
No, because there will be some people, on Twitter that are like, I knew it the whole time. And it's like, well, if you're right about this and you've been wrong about everything else that's happened in the past 2 years, because they straight up lied to us. Like, no reasonable person should have looked at that chart, especially after how honest they've been with the previous releases and said that's what's going to happen. I mean, we just had Zen 4 with people hating on the greater than 15% thing.
Yeah.
And I remember going, they said greater than 15%. Knowing AMD, they're just sandbagging. It'll be like 20 something. And it was. That didn't happen this time. And it's just shocking. Like how much it is off from what they said, right? And again, I think it's also like, I knew they were trying to double performance, but then at the same time, there are also people on Twitter saying they were going to quadruple performance, which I don't think you need a source at AMD to know that was never the target.
No,
but people believe that. So you have these people seeing all these rumors, and some of them were saying truly outlandish things, and then AMD didn't back up the times 4 rumors, but they basically said they were going to hit the performance I said they would, and then they didn't. I think I was mad personally, and I totally understand why people were mad.
On Twitter that are pretty mad about it. I mean, I see some of the leakers that are really getting pretty mad, and they're having a real go at AMD for it. Here's the interesting thing, right, from my perspective, because I have been paying so little attention to it, this time around I have basically got no skin in this game. Yeah. So I was able to just sit back and look at it and like look at it logically. And yeah, I mean, I said 20-25% slower than the 4090 would be 20% faster. It's probably 25% faster. I didn't miss by that much.
It depends. Like Linus Tech Tips found it 17%. I think it's not unfair to say 20. It's between 15 to 25, maybe on average a little above 20, I'd say.
I mean, before we saw the reveal, the only thing we had to go on with these 3 gigahertz clock speed rumors and the fact that they had more than doubled shader count. You literally got no idea where this card could end up. It could be anywhere.
They have 67% more bandwidth over the 6950 XT as well. That's another point I made. So let me get this straight. Their goal was to 2.5x teraflops 67% more bandwidth, and get a 35% performance increase. I think, again, they have benchmarks where it's tying the 6950 XT. I don't know. I think it's obvious that they were hoping for way better than this.
It all comes down to this double pumped shaders thing that they've done, and sharing of resources, as I mentioned in a recent video. Whenever I hear the word shared resources, I always think, go back to Bulldozer and how bad that was. I think that's where the problem is going to be. If it's underperforming relative to the 6950 XT in a game or two, it's simply because they are not getting this full shader utilization out there. I don't know if this is...
Right, but we saw this happen with Ampere, where they doubled the CUDA core count.
Yeah, and they didn't get anywhere near the same results.
But they did get like a 30 to 50% increase per SM, and AMD seems to have gotten 5% increase per SM. Like, this is shocking. Like, and no one thought it would be worse than Ampere's increase per.
Ampere, Lovelace is basically just Ampere on a better node, and more shaders. So that's all it is.
With unlimited L2 cache.
Yeah, with a bunch of L2, which I don't know if it's even doing a huge amount for it, in all honesty. Nvidia got 55% faster than the 3090 Ti. 55% is more than we've been getting recently, for sure. But again, 8 nanometers to 5 nanometers, they're getting higher clock speeds, and they ramped up the shader count again. So I can only really think that's... I expected more from the 4090, which might shock some people, but just based on what I had analyzed...
it's about exactly what I expected, which is to say about double a 3090, 55 to 65% better than a 3090 Ti. And you can find benchmarks where it's crazy.
Yeah.
This was always about square where I expected it. I don't even think it was at the lower end. I think it was pretty much square in the middle of what I expected. Well, the rasterization was maybe slowly below the median I expected.
Yeah.
But the ray tracing was above what I expected.
Yeah.
Depending on the ray tracing, obviously.
Yeah.
It varies a lot.
There's no doubt about it. 4090, it's a beast of a card. 4K ray tracing is now absolutely viable. I just sort of expected more in raster from it, which, going back to your previous point, is why I simply cannot believe that AMD even thought for a minute that this 300 square millimeter chip was going to be good enough. I just can't see how they would have analyzed it that way.
I was told about a presentation where they were like, this is Radeon's Matisse, Zen 2 moment.
On paper, it could have been 20-30% faster than the 4090, had everything, had these shaders really worked like Navi 21s. There's no doubt about it. On paper, it could have been that good, but
there's the occasional benchmark where it does beat the 4090. So
that's always that as well. Yeah.
So you almost wonder if they saw some testing and they're like, oh, we're going to do it. And then this happens, a month or two before launch. They're like, oh, we're not going to do it on average, actually.
There's a handful of games, maybe 3 or 4 games that I've seen where it beats and let me get out of the way that these are all AMD sponsored titles. Yeah. So there is that as well. But then again, how many titles has Nvidia sponsored recently?
The ray tracing ones, that's a huge issue. It's like when people are like, what do you think about Portal RTX's benchmarks? And I'm like, I don't.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting thing of maybe testing the same architectures theoretically, but I think it's recently emerged in the Portal RTX, that there was something about how it's not even really programmed for AMD. Or Ampere, I think, right? Yeah. It is programmed to make Lovelace look good.
Make Lovelace sell more cards, basically, which is fair enough. If they want to do that, then I think that is fair enough, as long as they're doing it with old games like Portal and not messing with current titles.
That's a fair point. If Nvidia is going to pull their tessellation ocean bullshit they did with Crysis 2, hey, sure, go do it on Quake with RTX. I don't care that Quake has RTX.
Yeah, basically, to me, that's just a bonus for their buyers. The buyers are getting a bonus out there. I think RTX, Portal RTX looks pretty good. And I've seen that you can plug it into other older games like Half-Life 2, and it really makes it...
That's cool. I'd want to check that out.
Exactly. These are the kind of things that would make me go buy Nvidia rather than buying AMD, which this is an interesting point, something that we haven't touched on, but something that's been in my mind is that Nvidia are just pushing all the new stuff, all the new technologies, AMD seem to be lagging behind or not really doing anything exciting. The exact same thing we can say about ray tracing. The XTX actually surprised me with its ray tracing performance. It has closed the gap, I think, in some ways. It was closer to the 4080 in ray tracing than I expected it to be. But it's not because...
Yeah, it's a bit, again, though, it's like, I agree. Yeah. It's just a bit all over the place.
Yeah.
You know, there's a couple where you could point to if you're an Nvidia fanboy and it's bad looking.
Yeah.
But then there's some where it almost matches it. I do agree that, it's hard for me to say it's impressive until we see if they fix it in 2 months. You know what I mean? It's just so hard because it's like, but if I'm playing devil's advocate, I can point to some pretty bad ones.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about this is, it's been so long since AMD actually seemed to do anything really innovative, like true, chiplets, yeah? That's from like an architectural standpoint, obviously, and a design standpoint. So obviously chiplets are very, very innovative. But in terms of value that they're given to gamers, like in ray tracing and stuff like this, and like as we talked about Portal RTX, they just don't seem to be doing the extras, yeah? I remember back, obviously, to like the 5870, 5850 days when AMD, brought out Eyefinity. And I mean, I lost my mind when that came out.
That was a major selling point, actually.
I am always immune to advertising, right? But when I saw that, I went and bought 2 monitors and a 5850 the same day. I just had to experience this, like, surround gaming on like a really fast graphics card. They haven't done anything like that to entice me since then, basically. Yeah.
It's just they're always copying and it's like, this is where I can bring up like FSR 3 and DLSS 3 as well. Like, don't get me wrong. I think at first DLSS 3 is mostly a joke.
Yeah.
But there's a couple games where it works well, and you could see a situation where with NVIDIA Reflex where they like throw out frames to improve latency.
Yeah.
If they could get that algorithm better, where they throw out the artifacted frames more often and get the latency closer to native, it never will be. It inherently can't be.
Yeah.
But if they could get it to be like at least a bit of a boost in latency and not have the artifacts noticeable, once we have 480 hertz displays, DLS3, I think, has promise, not in every game, but in half of the games you have. That's just another feature NVIDIA can just point you out of like 1,000 features.
Yeah.
And I know FSR3 is coming, but why can't they make one of these? It's interpolation. Our big screen TVs have been doing it for years. Why can't AMD be the first to do FreeSync? Like any of it. I don't know.
At some point, I think you have to say this is why the XTX is a slightly faster card than Raptor, yet costs $200 less, because it's lacking features. Never mind the fact that both cards are stupidly priced. AMD are faster and cheaper because they kind of have to be, yeah. And that's not.
And that didn't used to be true, right? Like, I think you would agree. I'm imagining PhysX was a complete and utter joke.
Yeah.
I mean, it was. I called it the popcorn injection. Like every game, all of the particles just literally
squares popping out of stuff. Yeah, it just looks stupid. Yeah,
it looked dumb. DLSS was a complete joke. Ray tracing on Battlefield 5 looked worse than no ray tracing. I was like laughing on my 2060 walking around as like the squares of lighting appeared in front of me and they were all blurry. I was like, this looks so bad.
Yeah.
But I think we can agree that by around Ampere, all of a sudden, everything just started working. DLSS was a real feature. Ray tracing didn't make the game worse. You could turn it off or on, but it didn't make it look worse. And it was, so at a minimum, it's a feature. And now we've got all DLSS 3. I would believe it could get to a point where it's not complete garbage. And
you've got to say they improved 1 and 2, yeah? And like you said, ray tracing has improved as well. So when NVIDIA sort of sets their mind to something, and that this is their strategy going forward, they do tend to achieve their goals, I think. There's no.
But that's what annoys me is people always used to say they had better features. I don't think they did, but they do now.
Yeah, they do now. Yeah, they didn't before. I mean, okay, they had Shadow Play maybe like a year before, and AMD had like whatever theirs is called, and stuff like that. But yeah, the big thing for me, obviously, way back then was Eyefinity, which really cemented me firmly in the AMD fanboy camp at that time. Yeah, I just simply had to have that. And NVIDIA's solution was a joke as well. You needed 2 cards, didn't you? You can only do it if you had 2 cards on Nvidia.
You know, back then, the biggest feature for me AMD had was more than a gigabyte of RAM in their freaking graphics cards. Like, that was really a problem in a lot of games.
Here's another interesting point, right? Because obviously the XTX has got a 384-bit memory bus, so it's either going to be 12 or 24 gigabyte of VRAM. Yeah, and I don't know what the cost of 12 gigabytes of GDDR6 is, but it can't be that cheap. I wouldn't have thought.
It'd be like $100 at most.
Yeah,
but I think it's usually $5 to $10 a gigabyte. Lately, probably $7 a gigabyte.
Yeah, they basically had to go with 24 on that card, which kind of gives it more of a high end feel as well. But is this card really going to be utilizing 24 gigabyte? I don't think so. Yeah, so it is an extra cost there, it looks good on marketing. Yeah, the thing is though, it's also, even sitting at idle, that's going to be drawing more watts as well on that. So there is, maybe there's another reason for why the power is slightly higher than what we've sort of been expecting.
Well, besides the chiplets too, you know, that's inherently going to waste joules.
Yeah, the communication between the chiplet, basically between the GCD and the MCDs, it's not as high as what some people said. I think it probably comes in below 20 watts, in fact. If true, it is definitely worth it. If you're much over like 40 watts for that communication, then that's starting to be a bit of an issue. But if it's below 20 watts, and the fact that you're disaggregating, you're getting rid of the cache, you're getting rid of the memory buses off the main chip. It's a huge thing. This is the biggest advantage AMD has had since 2011 probably, I would say. They just need to release a bigger chip. They've got to. If AMD does not launch a larger Navi 30 based chip next year, I will be absolutely amazed. And not only that, I think I will just give up entirely on the company. Because why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they?
The RTX 4090 is so big that I was considering digging one of my old compact liquid coolers from storage to cool my processor if I were to test the 4090 in my desktop. And unfortunately, I found out that at some point it had broken pretty badly. And so I guess I'll just need to buy a new one if I go down that route. But, whatever I end up using, this highlighted the dangers of liquid cooling. They're dangers that the Ice Giant Pro Siphon Elite does not need to worry about. Today's sponsor is brought to you by Ice Giant and their Pro Siphon Elite that uses thermosiphon technology, which was initially developed for use for industrial applications to make an incredibly innovative phase change cooler that performs like the best liquid coolers on the market, and it has the reliability and simplicity of an air cooler. And if you support this company, Ice Giant, you're supporting a startup in Austin, Texas that stands by their product with a unprecedented 10-year warranty. So whether you're looking to cool Zen 4, Raptor Lake, Threadripper, or some upcoming Xeon Extreme product from Intel, know that Ice Giant has you covered without requiring liquid cooling for these beasts. And their product is available at dozens of retailers globally, and you can go to Amazon right now and use a coupon code to get an additional $25 off. Click the link in the description to buy the Ice Giant Pro Siphon Elite, and if you do, you're also supporting Moore's Law is Dead. Consider the Pro Siphon Elite today. Well, let me combine I have a couple reader mails here. So one of them is AWS Danny, and long story short, he says he's disappointed in RDNA 3, and he's like, do you think at these prices they've done anything to damage NVIDIA's mindshare? And then Brendan kind of asks a follow-up question to this, where he asks, has this launch shaken your confidence at all in what they're going to be able to bring to market in the next year after this generation?
The only issue that I can see is the power is slightly higher. In the run-up, we kept hearing, after we saw 2.5 gigahertz and 2.3 gigahertz clock, I was thinking, oh dear, there's something badly going wrong here with the clock speeds. But now we know that that's not true. The clock speed,
at least not entirely true. Like, clearly it can from the leak, or from the reason why they didn't benchmark today.
The only reason they didn't launch a 3 gigahertz reference card that I can see is because they didn't have the shroud to stick on top of it. Yeah, it was just a throttled under gaming. So they've had to do, like, the best that this reference card can possibly do is around 2.5 gigahertz. And it has dropped performance because looking at that overclocking result on Tech Power Up that you mentioned earlier, this is scaling almost perfectly by the looks of things.
You'd almost argue it seems to be
even better,
getting rid of some of their bottlenecks that they clearly have. Yeah,
better, yeah. Something like 21% faster, almost tying the 4090. Yeah,
it's nuts.
Yeah, I don't understand.
So clearly it was designed to hit 3 gigahertz, and it seems like honest to God, it seems like, let's be honest, they're using multiple dies. There's going to be inherent efficiency problems if you use multiple dies. It seems like RDNA 3's sweet spot for efficiency might have actually been at 3 gigahertz, around 400 watts.
Yeah.
It would have been less efficient while you're gaming probably than Lovelace.
Yeah.
But oh well, I still am just sitting here going, unless tech power-ups thing ends up being a fluke.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard this from someone else last night too, and I almost made it a big deal in my video, but I'm like, until I see multiple outlets get into 3.2 gigahertz, I don't want to be the guy that says it.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, I mean,
but so far it seems like it might be.
Yeah. I mean, it could be a golden sample they've got hold of, obviously. And
I talked to 2 other reviewers, which I won't say who, of course, because, you know, for obvious reasons, they might not want to say they tell me things, but they couldn't replicate it, at least with whatever boards they had.
Okay.
But I find that odd because Tech PowerUp had 2 boards that both seem to overclock over 10%.
Was there not some kind of like hard limiter on the reference card, or are you talking about aftermarket cards that couldn't hit that?
I think one person I talked to, I think they both said they had an aftermarket card and they couldn't. I don't know. I don't know if there's like a bug in Wattman for these people.
Could be,
or if they didn't put effort into it because they were so dissatisfied with the performance. Not to be a jerk, but some of the responses I got from one of the reviewers I reached out to is he's like, this thing sucks. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, but I don't know. I want to see someone else test it. Frankly, I kind of want to get my hands on it and see if I can replicate it.
Yeah.
Because there's something here then where I don't think there's a point in AMD launching a 7950 XTX, you know. I'm so mad they call it XTX now again.
Yeah.
I don't see a point in them doing that until they know what they can get out of their drivers. I think they're going to work like hell for 2 months, see how much of the flaws they have are hardware versus software versus it's usually a combination of both that you work around. And then they'll decide what to do. But man, if they can claw back even 10% performance just in drivers right now, I do not know why they wouldn't put the extra Infinity cache on there, push this thing to 3.2 gigahertz, and launch the 450 watt card that for sure would be at least 20% better than now.
I mean, the last time they did something like that would have been the 7970 gigahertz edition, when they launched the 7970, and that really underwhelmed me with that launch. And then Nvidia beat it with the real mid-range GK104, the GTX 680. Then all of a sudden, AMD found another couple of hundred megahertz and launched a gigahertz edition.
And then also found like another 20% performance in the drivers somehow. I remember the reviews for that too, though. Like what was it? It's this something driver release. I remember multiple reviews saying this just feels like a different card. I honestly am almost mad at AMD. How did this happen? That they were just leaving 30% on the table. I'm honestly wondering if that's happening again this time, and that's why they didn't push it yet, because they're like, we can make another SKU. Pushing it now before the drivers are fixed is stupid.
There is also something at the design and fabrication level that a lot of people might not realize, like the 7970 Tahiti, it was called, was very disappointing compared to what we'd seen previously. But when they launched Pitcairn, like the mid-range, that was extremely impressive. Yeah,
7850 and 7870 were crazy efficient and tiny dies, like 200 millimeters.
The efficiency of those cards was out of this world. I had a 7850 for ages, and this thing was pulling like 90 watts in gaming. Yeah, and it was pretty fast.
You remember when mid-range cards used 90 watts? Yeah.
You can't even get that in an APU anymore. But yeah, the thing about that was apparently AMD sort of went too conservative on their main Tahiti die regarding clock speeds and stuff like that. And the node had improved based on what they originally thought it was going to be. So we might see something like that again with the Navi 32. If the node is actually better than what AMD expected, they might get, if they just push it that little bit more, the design, they might just get a lot more out of it, which is why I am optimistic, at least for Navi 32. One of the reasons why I'm optimistic for that. I think architecturally, there's nothing that worries me about this launch apart from the power, which is a solvable problem.
It's just, yeah, because right now it is just even worse actually than the performance off from what they said.
Yeah,
I would say. Well, here's the thing though. When I talked to people yesterday, it wasn't clear how much of it can be fixed in drivers. But one thing, and this was one of those people at AMD that like almost never talks to me.
Yeah,
they don't want to do it often, but every now and then they respond, and they felt compelled to talk about what's going on yesterday out of the blue. And he said that basically, don't worry about the future RDNAs. The issues they have are already fixed in the next architecture.
Yeah.
And what I'm wondering is what you think the next architecture is, because obviously there's RDNA 4, but we know from a public roadmap that the Strix APU that comes out in a year, that has something that they call RDNA 3 Plus.
3 Plus, yeah.
And I'm wondering if what we're seeing is they ran into issues. They were always going to run into issues. What they're doing is pretty groundbreaking with a graphics card. They always knew they were going to be able to tweak a ton of things with the follow-up.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, and I'm kind of hearing RDNA 4 has been pushed back a little bit to probably mid to late 2024. I do wonder if they're going to have a full RDNA 3 lineup, RDNA 3 Plus lineup, where it's like all those issues we had are fixed. Now it runs at 3.4 gigahertz. Now we have these extra features. Now we know how to better balance the dies. I wonder if you think that's likely to happen late next year.
Well, historically, the Plus has only really meant a change of node. So they would be moving to 4 nanometers. However, yes, I do believe next year, I think we'll see an entire new lineup. You'll see something around about 500 square millimeters at the top end. This is going to be fast. And then I guess they could rebrand the current one, but if it is riddled with bugs, why do that? They would probably just increase
the die. Just retape it out, yeah.
They'd probably just increase the die size to maybe 450. Probably 400 millimeters on this. That's just the GCD. And then they'd have another one lower, maybe 250 or something like that. Yeah, I expect to see an entire top to bottom, real top to bottom, because I do not believe that this is the top chip. I'm just never going to believe that they would possibly do that. Historically, history shows it, yeah? They launch mid-range on a new node. That's what AMD does. That's what they've done here. And yeah, okay, I mean, if you consider that they took the chiplets off the main die, it would be about a 500 millimeter square die. But it just doesn't really count because they've left so much on the table. There's so much there left on the table with simply having a 300 millimeter square die. This is
it's interesting too. I always heard Navi 32's development was way behind 31's, like targeting almost mid next year. I'm imagining they're going to push it up a little bit because they are succeeding in selling out RDNA 2 stock easily now.
Yeah.
But you got to wonder too if almost like to characterize it like this would be completely incorrect. I know there'd be people I talk to at AMD who would get so mad, but like, I'm not saying it is exactly this, but it almost to me feels like Navi 31 was just that, first step, like almost bug finding mission.
Right.
I mean, like, I hate to call it that because from what I'm hearing, it's like, dude, these cards aren't going to break. They're going to work. If you buy them right now, they're going to work at that level of performance at least forever. They work. But I almost wonder if this is like a bottleneck and bug finding mission, and almost intentionally Navi 32 is 6 months behind it because there's just no point in launching. Like let's make sure we get everything that we're learning into that one that we need to, especially actually when they have so many last gen stock to get rid of.
I mean, look, all these companies will tell you the same thing. You change the architecture on a process that you're used to, and then you change when you move to like a new node, you don't change anything. It's basically what Nvidia did. Lovelace is basically, Ampere with a bunch of more L2 cache. This is not like a huge design change. RDNA 3 is yet another huge design change for AMD. They've added chiplets on top of that, and they've moved from 7 nanometers to 5 nanometers. It's all a miracle that this thing came out at all. if you look at it,
I mean, yeah, where's Ponte Vecchio from Intel and stuff?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And Sapphire Raptor.
Like yeah, you're right. It's almost a miracle this thing has come out at all when you consider they've done 3 major steps.
Yeah.
I think that tells you how much more competent they are than a few years ago, by the way.
They're not the same company that they were. Even the graphics, the CPU side of things obviously changed massively with Zen. The graphics team has taken a bit longer, and Nvidia are a different proposition to Intel completely as well. There's no doubt about that. Nvidia are just a better company. But I think they're getting there. I think, I've seen enough on RDNA 3 to tell me that AMD wants to win next year. I don't think Nvidia can stop them. I really don't.
And I think this is something me and you agree on here. It's not that I don't think Nvidia is going to go all out. And by the way, the early whispers I've heard is they're working on some Blackwell, 3 nanometers, a much lesser upgrade over 5 than 5 is over 7.
Yep.
And it sounds like they might be going with an 800 millimeter squared 3 nanometer die, which the cost on that is going to be insane.
Yeah.
But it sounds like they're going all out. But even then, I look at where they're going, and they're kind of running out of levers to pull. And then once they hit 3 nanometer, I don't think 2 is ready for a while. Yeah. You could see AMD just stacking tons of stuff. I think Nvidia isn't in the corner now, and they've won again. But I do feel like that unless they've got something else crazy coming, which maybe they do, they're starting to become pushed in a corner in terms of where they can go for performance.
Well, I'm not sure what video it was I talked about it, but this is all about the reticle limit and how big a GPU you can physically build at TSMC. Currently, it's something like 850 square millimeters. That is the biggest die that you can build at TSMC. But I'm not sure if it's 2 nanometers or when this comes in, but the reticle limit is basically going to be halved. So the maximum die size within the next...
Oh, yes, I did hear about this. Yeah.
The maximum is going to be 400 and something square millimeters. Yeah. So if NVIDIA doesn't have a chiplet program, but they've not really shown any evidence of, if they don't have that, then they're going to be limited to 400 square millimeters. Probably talking 5 years in the future. Yeah. Or maybe 4 years.
So a couple of gens from now.
Yeah,
so it's not happening yet.
But they're going to have something by that point because, they're still packing more and more cache onto these dies as well. And cache isn't scaling anymore. Mm-hmm. So they're basically going to run out of cores. Yeah, they'll get a bit more power. They'll get some extra clock speeds, but that's not enough. Yeah, every new generation needs to pack on more and more cores for it to really, we're seeing it, to even get 50% faster. In AMD's case, 2.5 times has only got them maybe 40% faster. Yeah. So, they need something major in terms of manufacturing and design regarding chiplets, but that is probably 4 years in the future. AMD are already there. Yeah. They're already there. They can just keep on stacking high on these Infinity, whatever, cache chips. They're never going back. Yeah. AMD are just like Zen. AMD is never going away from this chiplet architecture. They're just going to pile on more and more Infinity cache off the main die.
I'm now remembering TSMC, I think 2 nanometer has that smaller reticle limit, and in return, they're or you can go with N3X, which is our mega reticle limit version of 3 nanometer for high clock speeds. But again, that's one generation.
Yeah.
After that, they can't just keep doing that on the same node.
No,
it's interesting to think. It was a shaky landing. It wasn't a smooth landing, but I guess, AMD really has been trying to do a lot this gen, and they did land the plane. Yeah. The plane has landed.
They've landed it, and to me, they're closer than they've ever been. With what looks like a winning strategy going forward, assuming they pursue that strategy. Yeah, I think this
is the weird thing, though. It's why didn't they just accept that then? Call it the 7800 XT, price it a little more reasonably, and drop the weird marketing. Just with we know Zen 5 is going to be bigger than Zen 4. So why did you overcharge for Zen 4 if that gets people in the door? I still think some of the decisions are just bizarre.
It's just so frustrating from our perspective looking at it. And the buyers, anybody buying these cards is frustrated at the prices. In the end, it is simply a monetary decision. This is about making as much money as they can on a mid-range GPU. They just don't seem to be in the mindset of taking a loss or taking less profits and really taking the fight to Nvidia. And they haven't been in that mindset since basically 14 nanometers Polaris. Yeah, they've been
they don't know when to do it. Like RDNA 2 right now, I'm hearing like when you see these 6900 XTs that went for below $600 or these 6600s below 200, I'm told those are being sold at cost.
Yeah.
Like and AMD's just liquidating them.
Yeah.
But it's like maybe you could have charged 10% more, not lost money on RDNA 2, and then you'd have the money to price the 7800 XT at 700 instead of 900. I don't know. It's just it seems like they don't know when to do the right move. They can do it, but on one hand, they're just losing money here, and on the other hand, they're overcharging for something that probably should have more afforded to be cheaper.
I mean, sadly, you have to say like the day of the real bargain looks to be over regarding GPU. When was the last?
The biggest bargains have been had.
Yeah. Well, by far, there's nothing. Neither company is even trying to give us a good deal anywhere. Yeah, like normally, like in the past, what was it, GTX 470? No, the Nvidia's card that had the 3.5 gigabyte. What was the name of that card again?
Oh, the 970.
Yeah, the 970. Yeah, I mean, okay, they conned us massively with the 4 gigabyte thing, but that was still a real bargain. I mean, that was $329 when that launched. I mean, that was a bargain card that people lost their minds over. Yeah,
you know, Lovelace is almost comparable to Maxwell in that way too, in that it's just different. Like with Lovelace, they kept the prices high, but they went crazy with cooling because they didn't want to lose. I feel like with Maxwell, the 200 series scared the shit out of Nvidia, and they're like, "We're not taking prisoners with Maxwell."
Yeah,
like, and they took the entire market when they decided
basically,
to do that.
Yeah. And how much mindshare did they gain from that as well? When I mean, AMD were toiling at that point, but they did come back quite strong. Obviously, Hawaii a bit later, but I mean, when you're in a position like AMD's graphics division is in, with such a powerful competitor, they've got to offer more than what they've done this time around. Yeah, the XTX, I have got no intention of buying at $1,000 whatsoever. And I think it's only AMD fans, real strong AMD fans, that would even consider buying that card at that price.
Because it's still $1,000.
It's $1,000.
It's still a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
you know, it's interesting. I had one of my contacts who works in the industry suggest that there's something going on here, though, where AMD is almost scared to take a lot of market share because they had over 50% with the 3000 and the 4000 series HD ones way, way, way long ago.
Yeah.
And then they tried to like take the entire market by charging, frankly, too little money for their cards. They never did it. Nvidia got more R&D. I feel like he suggested, like from the people he's talked to at AMD, that they almost seem like they don't want to get above 30% market share because then it becomes hard.
They're never
like
going to get anywhere near that at this the way they're currently.
No,
going.
I agree, but
yeah.
It's like I think I almost feel like, especially when I look at the bizarre launch, the pricing, the naming of this generation, that AMD is happy to take, if they can, 1%, 5% market share a year and eventually get to 35%, but they have no intention. And to the point that they almost don't want to get to 40% because, you know, a lot of people have been asking me, can AMD take market share this generation? And it's like, I mean, if they went for it, it's cheaper, uses less silicon. I think they could. But the problem is NVIDIA has so much of the market share now, they would have to manufacture like 4, 5, 6 times the cards they usually make, AMD would, to take market share because NVIDIA just has like 80% of the total addressable market. So I don't know. It makes you wonder, like, if AMD understands, or for better or worse, that they shouldn't go for too much too quickly with graphics. And I wonder if every time we see them not go for the kill, they're like, we don't want to go for the kill. We don't want to. You know, I wonder. But it doesn't justify like why they couldn't have done the obvious things, right? I would say.
Well, who was it? Was it Einstein that said that madness is, or insanity is, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result? Yeah. AMD just
someone said that. Yeah,
I think it was Einstein. I mean,
I think that was invented by Far Cry 3. Actually, I'm just kidding. I just remember that's when everyone kept saying that. Quote,
kept saying it then. Yeah.
Yeah.
AMD are doing the sort of same thing over and over and over, but in all honesty, I hadn't actually really thought about it until I talked about it just there. The fact is, they've changed the node, they've brought out chiplets, and they've changed their architecture. And as you said, they have landed. Yeah, they're only a couple of months behind Nvidia in terms of launch. So they've done a lot. It's almost like the groundwork's been done there. This is why I said this is AMD's Zen moment for graphics. Yeah, it's like this is their Zen. It is Zen 1, no. Yeah, RDNA
right,
3
not
is
Zen 2. They
1.
were hoping to be Zen 2.
Possibly hoping it was be Zen 2, and that would have been fantastic. But this is a Zen 1 moment, and I, for one, fully expect it to go exactly the same way. Nvidia will be much, much tougher competition than what Intel put up. Nvidia will
right, they're not going to take the market as quickly from Nvidia as they did Intel. But I mean, you can even see it, right? They're talking about an RDNA 3 Plus. It's almost like that will be the Zen Plus, where they get that little bit closer and fix the bugs, and then they'll have a Zen, an RDNA 4, and that one will probably use multiple graphics dies and go for the crown. I think so. I think we can see what they're trying to do. I just hope they don't keep doing these dumb naming schemes when they do it.
See, I basically gave up on stuff like all this marketing when it comes to naming schemes, and I complain about mid-range GPUs all the time. And every time I say like a 4080 is a mid-range GPU, people get upset by it. But it is, and it always will be as far as I'm concerned. It's just a very expensive one.
One thing I point out that I saw you point out in your video a couple of years ago, like getting fed up with the people that argue about what Titan class is, which I couldn't agree more. It's whatever they say it is. But he said, let me explain to you mid-range. Here's 102, here's 104, here's 106. Which one's in the middle?
Basically, Which one?
I mean, come on, guys. What are we arguing about here?
The power of marketing that these companies have, it's shocking to me in many ways to see how people constantly fall for it over and over again. And AMD, sadly, there's no doubt about it. AMD's marketing has taken a turn for the worse over the past few years. A lot of people upset by, you're obviously upset by them not hitting their targets, not hitting their power targets.
Well, and lying. If they would have just been honest, it's ridiculous. It just seemed unnecessary to lie.
The thing is, right, if they're lying and saying they're hitting 40% performance, meanwhile, Nvidia, Jensen walking around with his leather jacket saying 2x, every second word is 2x, which they didn't get, They basically got half of what he was saying, up to 2 times faster. In reality, 55% faster. So AMD are saying up to 1.7x, and they got 40. If you look at it, they're both basically lying at the same level. It's just that Nvidia said up to 2x and AMD said up to 1x.
But this is what felt more insidious to me. And I totally agree. Like, if you were going to say who lies harder, sure, Nvidia, but it's almost like they're so past the point of reasonableness that I filtered it out when I saw the Lovelace reveal. It said 2 to 4x. My brain just in one ear out the other. Like, I knew, just throw out that. And I didn't even look up the footnotes. I knew when someone asked me, they're like, what is 2 to 4x? I'm like, oh, I bet that's with ray tracing and DLSS 3 on. Like, that's where they're getting that number. But that's the thing, is it was obvious. It was obvious 4x is with DLSS and ray tracing on. And AMD put together the same charts they do every year, and they were off by a factor of like 2. Like, what? That to me almost feels like a bigger lie.
The way to look at this is they built up a lot of good press, and people like to see when they're honest. And even in some cases, they've downplayed their performance, and they've actually come up with better performance than what their slide showed. This is what they've done over the past few years, and now because of this, they've lost all of that goodwill that they have built up in the press.
That's what I said, is like they've just lost the goodwill forever, and that was dumb.
They've lost the goodwill, and when it comes to the next time, I, for one, especially, will be looking at it with a more critical eye, what they're doing. And when they say, we're 50 or 70% faster, my analysis will be, you're probably 35% faster instead then. So you just have to do it that way and say, well, if you're going to tell us that, then we're just going to assume this is what you really are. You're just not going to be that quick. It's sad that they can't just tell the bloody truth, but
they had, and they were like the last company that kind of had that goodwill, like that they seemed to be straight shooters. They didn't like show real world performance benchmarks, and it was like how fast you can save a PDF. That's hilarious with Intel. But like now they've kind of done it.
as far as I'm concerned, looking at the pricings, looking at how they're not really looking at how they're just not taking the fight to Nvidia, looking at the prices recently, and now looking at how their marketing can just tell us a bunch of crap. They are essentially no better than Nvidia or Intel when it comes to that. Yeah. So any
at least in the Radeon division, it seems like the Ryzen division's more honest for now. We'll see.
That's a fair point to make. It has been Radeon that's.
Let me ask you this then: if AMD was aware, they could easily get another 10 to 20% from better drivers. Don't you think they would have delayed the launch until January? That's an argument I made too. Like if they knew for sure they've got another 20% in the tank, if they just sit down and make better drivers for 2 months, that they would do it. And that the reason they launch these buggy cards now is because they're not sure how long it's going to take nor what they'll get out of it. Would you agree? Or do you think AMD would actually be that dumb to not just like delay it to February? Who cares? Like we're in a recession.
I look at it the opposite way, basically. If they think they could make 10 to 20% in drivers, maybe they could make 20% overall. If we say better clock speeds with better cooling and some driver fixes, maybe they can hit 15-20% overall. How many months that will take, it's hard to tell. Maybe they decided to launch RDNA 3 for, because they said they would have it in 2022.
They did do that, yeah. Now, a lot of people told me that's the only reason it came out this year, too.
Yeah,
they said it would.
I read that as well, which seems like ludicrous to me for them to do that, and especially if the product is as unfinished as many people believe. I think it's just a stupid thing to do. But they've done it anyway. So yeah, there is that. It's really hard to say. I personally would not have launched it if I thought there was another 20% in the tank. Yeah, I would even have waited.
And you could have polished drivers, maybe FSR 3 is ready. Like, why not just wait for that, right?
The thing is, right, if they're selling like 6950 XTXs and 6800, whatever, even at cost, at least they're still holding on to a bit of market share. Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. AMD is not going to sell a lot of 7900 XTXs. This is barely going to show in their bottom line, I would say. I mean, okay, they're selling out now, but
when I heard they did ship a lot, though, like more than the 4090, at least for now. So they're trying to ship a lot. See, that's the other thing is, no, I think they actually made a lot of them. How much will they make next year? I don't know, but they're trying to ship at least up to 200,000, I think, by the middle of January. So to me, this suggests they wanted to outsell the 4090.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. And a lot of people say, I'm an AMD fanboy. Obviously, I did have a soft spot for the company at one point, and I still kind of do. And I want to see them doing well against Nvidia. They've already got there against Intel. But if AMD, I don't want AMD to sell 200,000 cards at 1,000. But I don't want
right.
them like that, yeah? I hope they don't.
It'd be so much easier to root for them if it was like a $800, 7800 XT.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I hope that they have to drop prices, and I hope Nvidia have to drop prices as well. But, that's just, you got to look at this from a consumer standpoint. We hoped that Nvidia would fail with a 1200 4080, and we should be hoping that AMD fails with a $1,000 7900 XTX as well.
Or at least the $900 XT, which when I looked at it in my analysis video, I'm like,
that's a guaranteed
I'm like,
fail.
It's literally the same price performance, I think, as the 4080. I was like, one's 25% weaker, or it's like, and it's 25% cheaper.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like, it's literally, I guess it has more RAM and it fits in your case. So that's
AMD will market it as the best graphics card under $900.
Yeah, that's what they're going to say. Yeah.
For all those people who are in the market for a $900 market graphics card, then yeah, it's the best one that you can get.
That one's going to have to get a price drop. Let me ask you this, because we're kind of getting on subject for this question. Dermish writes in and he says, "Hello, Tom and Jim. Will we get anything decent in the low end? The 6500 XT was kind of okay given the shortages, but after prices settled, I'm not sure. Can we look forward to a purpose-built next-gen experience under $300 at launch instead of something repurposed after it failed to sell in laptops in any upcoming generations?"
Well, here is one of the bigger disappointments about RDNA 3 for me, because we know that Navi 33 is still a monolithic GPU. It's not a chiplet GPU.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what was it? Sky just said it's something like 200 square millimeters or something. Or no?
Yeah, which is smaller than I expected. That's tiny.
Yeah. I mean, and that's obviously, with that being monolithic, that's got all the cache on it and stuff as well. So it is basically not going to perform anywhere like Navi 32. Well, it's going to be like really low end of this thing, I think. Where exactly that brings it in, I'm not entirely sure.
It's hard to say. My suggestion would be it'll be at least as good as an RX 6700 because it is 6 nanometer. Yeah. We have seen what you can do if you purpose build an architecture for even a small node shrink. There's rumors it'll be as good as a 6800 in 1080p. If it is, this is the best designed silicon in history.
It could,
what I would argue.
Walk crazily high. Yeah,
it could. If it does, if it hits like 3.5 gigahertz and it has that many shaders, I could see it in 1080p just because of how underutilized the high end cards are.
Yeah,
maybe. Maybe, but actually, I almost wonder the 6800. It was only like 30%. Well, no, I don't know. I think that's going to be a tall order. I think it's this generation that's bottlenecked in 1080p. Back then, you still saw the 6800 XT be maybe 50% better than the 5700 XT. So there's definitely diminishing returns already last gen, but I still think that's going to be a tall order. I guess what that would mean is they need to make something 20% smaller than the 6650 XT. That's 20%, or that's like 20 to 30% better.
Yeah,
I guess that's in the realm of possibility.
Yeah, they can ramp the clocks up to about 3.5. Yeah.
So I guess that's possible. Let's say, let's say best case scenario, pie in the sky, it's an RX 6800 in 1080p, and in 4K, it's, I don't know.
I mean, I would buy that if it was $350 probably. Yeah, I would just buy that. Yeah.
But you think no chance at 300 below?
I would like to say yes, but probably not if it matches that kind of performance. I don't think so.
Yeah, and you see, I agree. If I just write down these prices on a piece of paper, 1,000, 900, 700 for the 7800, then what? Probably 550.
50 probably.
And then, or 500. I'm getting down here, and even if it's cheaper to make, the lowest I see the 7600 XT with Navi 33 is 350.
Yeah,
that's the
probably.
Lowest.
Yeah. I just sort of did the math in my head as well, and that's what I came to. They'll probably try for 350 or 379, something like that.
And remember, this costs less to make than the 6600 XT did.
Yeah.
Do you think that means the mid-range is dead? Because all I'm saying is, guys, mid-range is now $500, high-end's 1,000, enthusiast is 1,500. They won. So that's what I say. I'm not going to change what I call mid-range if it's in the middle of the lineup. Yeah, the mid-range is now 500.
Yeah. The mid-range is pretty much high-end prices now. And we just have to... There's nothing we can do because it's a duopoly, and they are basically setting them. Nvidia sets the prices, and then AMD, rather than fight those prices with good products, they basically push their own margins up higher and higher. It started with the 5700 XT, basically, when Navi first launched. What was it they wanted for that? 550? And then there was a whole debated thing where they dropped $100 off it.
They wanted 450 and they dropped it to 400, I think. Yeah.
I mean, it's the bizarre thing is it looks reasonable now. To a couple of years later, because the prices have just gone even higher and higher and higher.
Yeah, I could see a correction happening next year. Like, I think you've seen Nvidia try to keep that trend going, and it's backfired with the 4080. I think it will backfire with the 7900 XT a little bit at least. And if they price the 4070 Ti at 900, I'm pretty sure that's going to backfire. So I think there is going to be a recorrection down. But if I were to guess where it's going to correct to, I don't think the mid-range is ever going to be $200 again. I think we should hope it goes back to like 400 or 350, and because they were going to try to get it to, 4080 12 gigabytes, 8104. They were going to try to make that 900.
Yeah.
Let's be clear what they were trying to accomplish. If that became 500, 400, I don't know if we should consider ourselves lucky, but I think Could have been worse.
Yeah, it could have been worse, and they would try to make it worse. I mean, people wonder why I made that video saying we should all be getting behind Intel. At least, Raja came out with a tweet recently saying the sweet spot for GPU should be 200 to 250 watts. Yeah, fair enough. Now, I would agree with that. 200 to 250 watts, that is where I buy graphics cards at that sort of wattage.
That's a good sweet spot to have when your 200 to 250 watt card is losing to AMD's 150 watt card. But sure, Raja. I hear they can run Counter-Strike now, so that's going well.
Alchemist has been a disaster, notwithstanding. Yeah, what he said is true. I mean, I would much rather see a return to that. But again, there's no way back for this. It looks like Nvidia will just keep on piling on more and more power if they have to. Yeah, and bigger shrouds. And this is it.
This piece of content is brought to you by Silver Knight PCs. Silver Knight PCs is a disabled, veteran-owned GPU and CPU retailer, PC repair shop, and boutique PC builder that is located in Fayetteville, North Carolina, but they ship globally. So if you're in the area, drop by their location to pick up reasonably priced components to upgrade your PC, and know that all of these components come with up to a 3-year warranty, and even refurbished products have warranties on them, and you can trade in your own parts for refurbishment as well, or contact them online and ask them about anything else you want them to do for you, including building a custom PC designed just for you. They're very easy to talk to. The owner of the company even sat down with me for a broken silicon last year and had a candid conversation about GPU shortages during the GPU shortages. They really are on the side of the consumer, and they really do put a lot of effort into making everything they sell the best it can be for their buyers. And I know this from firsthand experience. I got my RTX 4090 Supreme Liquid, the one that I am using to render this video in my PC here, and before sending it, they upgraded the thermal paste and thermal pads, and well, you can watch the process online. It's actually really cool. And the thing, well, I can tell you that it just doesn't get hot no matter how much power I let the dang thing use, and I can let it use a lot of power. So whether you're in the Fayetteville, North Carolina area and you want to pop in to buy a graphics card, or you want to custom order something from them online, click the link in the description and use offer code BROKENSILICON to get 6% off all orders. Using this offer code BROKENSILICON helps me a lot, and it helps them. And I am genuinely happy to finally get their sponsorship, as they really are a business that I can stand by as high quality and of genuine reliability. Go to Silver Knight PCs and use offer code BROKENSILICON today. And when it comes to ARC, honestly, my opinion is that all they've succeeded in doing is making AMD look better. Like all of those reviews for Alchemist, they were like, they kept saying, I saw it on Gamers Nexus, Hardware Unboxed, they would just be like, it took decades for AMD and Nvidia to get the drivers to be as good as they are. And I'm like, people didn't used to group those companies together.
Exactly,
I think Intel's only made people go, hey, maybe AMD should be charging more for the 6600 XT.
I mean, it is true. Graphics drivers are not simple things, and Intel clearly have got a ton of work to do there, but it appears that they're doing it. I mean, we saw some huge gains at 1080p, at least, I think, recently. If that's to be believed, I'm not entirely sure.
With their 3070 Ti size die.
Yeah. I mean,
how nice.
Architecturally, it looks like a complete disaster, Alchemist, in all honesty. I'm more interested in what they do next time around.
Well, I'll say from what I've heard, they've canceled all of Battlemage besides one die, and it's like a low-end one coming out 2024.
That's not good.
So all I can say is I think my opinion, the best we should hope for is Intel keeps making like one low-end card every year and a half or so they don't lose the progress they're making on drivers. But my personal estimate is we shouldn't expect anything competitive out of ARC until 2025 after it, because they don't have anything coming out next year. It's kind of a complete disaster, and it's really disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, I really, really was rooting for the GPU division.
Me too. Half of my videos in 2021 were ARC stuff.
Yeah. But in the end, it was never really likely to materialize, was it? When you consider the history and
let me tell you what you think about this, because this is a funny thing for me, because what is it? Ryan Shrout had a bit of a go at me on Twitter a few times. And then Raja seemed nervous and was like, anytime you ask what our roadmap is, I refer you back to this roadmap. And the roadmap said they were competing in Enthusiast in 2022. And I'm like, well, you didn't meet the roadmap so far, Raja. So I don't know why you're referring me to this. But I was talking to an Intel contact and I asked, have you noticed that? Like, we always were focusing on what they claimed about Alchemist. I didn't notice on this same chart that Raja keeps referring to, they said they would compete in Enthusiast in 2022. Granted, there's some wiggle room. What is Enthusiast really?
What is Enthusiast,
Next year, they said they're going to compete in Ultra Enthusiast. In 2025, they said they'd be above Ultra Enthusiast. I think there's no misinterpretation. If you're above the highest level on your chart, you say you're going to take the crown.
Yeah.
So whoever made this chart, and I didn't notice it until like 2 weeks ago, they said Ultra Enthusiast. I think they said they plan to compete with the 4090 next year.
Okay.
And I can't wait to see that competitor, Raja.
Yeah, it doesn't really strike me as very likely.
No.
No.
So I don't know. I don't know if maybe you don't have a lot of thoughts on it, but I just wonder when the buck's going to stop somewhere with them admitting ARC isn't really happening, guys. Like, what is it when it's the end of next year and they have no new cards out? Like, at what point do they admit anything? Or I wonder what you think, because they're still referring to this chart that says they'll compete with the 4090 next year.
I mean, to be honest with you, they've got to have some kind of GPU program. They can't abandon it. Yeah.
Right. And I think maybe it's going to hibernate for a few years, but how do you think they admit that if that's what happens? Because that's what I can't figure out, because they said they were going to launch in Q1 and they launched next to the 4090. They couldn't even beat the 6600 or 3060.
Yeah. I mean, performance was obviously really, really disappointing. And the pricing, even the pricing was disappointing because of the performance, basically. And it's a large die, like you said. It's very, very large. And the graphics card looks quite nice, but the drivers are a disaster. It's just really,
I have
really
one
tough.
here somewhere.
You got one there, yeah?
I still haven't opened it. I plan to hopefully start testing it this week.
Okay. I was looking at picking one up just for the sake of, messing around with it and seeing what it was all about. But then I decided I'm probably not going to spend $400 to do that. To put myself through that hell. I've been enough.
At least it came with Call of Duty, so I kind of wanted this one. So
you got the graphics card free with Call of Duty, or was it?
Yes, I got the graphics card free with Call of Duty for $350.
I don't know,
or whatever they charged for it. Yeah,
honestly, I don't know what they do. I cannot. It's just so difficult. Nvidia are so strong, and we see just how good AMD can be. Yeah, they're not that far behind Nvidia, if at all, any longer. And for Intel to catch up to that kind of level, I don't see it happening. I just don't. Luckily for Intel, even though they do need a GPU program somewhere there, I mean, they must be concerned about the data center losses that they're suffering to Nvidia as well there.
Yeah, I mean, and let's keep in mind, I never said that they're going to get rid of, AXG. They're not going to get rid of the graphics division. They're going to keep making graphics tiles. They're going to keep making like the Arctic sound, or now they call it Plex, which I think sounds really stupid for some reason.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think at some point the party, or like the denial, is going to have to stop, and they're going to have to admit that they might not have any gaming cards for a couple years.
I mean,
but
realistically,
I don't think
what else could they do realistically apart from maybe?
Well, look at their earnings. They can't keep selling these 3070s below cost.
Exactly.
Like, why?
Like 2-3 years ago, we would have been talking about this, and we would have said, well, it's all right. It's Intel. They've got a bottomless pit of money they can just keep on throwing at this crap.
I know.
Yeah, but now you look at it, and it's like, well, that bottomless pit of money is, you can see the bottom of it now. It's not bottomless, that's for sure. And yet they still need to have a graphics program. Meanwhile, they're losing market share in data center to both Nvidia and AMD, and it's just going to get worse before it gets better.
I thought they'd run out of money eventually, but I didn't think it happened this soon.
No.
Right. I thought it'd be like 2025 if things went horrible, but they're already out of money, and like I know some I'm worried I'm going to lose some Intel sources because people keep getting laid off. I know multiple people there who are just like, my friend just got laid off.
Yeah. I mean, they were too big anyway, like over 110,000 people there. That's way too big for a company in tech these days. It's all gone the other way, yeah. I mean, Nvidia, how many people have Nvidia got now? 25,000 or something?
Yeah, I know. I don't know what Nvidia is up to. I think they're up to about at least 20, but I know AMD is up to over 15,000. They used to be less than 10 just like 5 years ago.
Lisa Su said 22,000 recently at something.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they've really
my number is
hiring.
from, I checked 2 months ago, so it's already,
they've really been hiring. Over 20,000 it was seen on a slide from something. So they've been hiring, no doubt about it as well. But Intel, I mean, I don't know how many people at Intel now, but there's a lot of people going to lose their jobs. And sadly, it's going to keep going that way. But it has to happen. It's got to happen because otherwise...
and they're going to go to AMD. I think actually someone I know went from Intel to AMD. Like an Intel source becomes an AMD source.
Yeah.
Like
I know that
type of thing.
I think they both have the same source for that one.
Yeah. I think you know who I'm talking about. And it's like, that's just going to keep happening. And, it was Pat that recently hired 20,000 people when he came into office a few years ago. I'm wondering, like, at what point do we know if Pat's doing... I'm curious what you think about this, because I liked Pat. Everyone likes Pat. Everyone says good things about Pat. They're like, he's another Lisa Su.
Yeah.
But at what point is he clearly not? Is it all like... And let me say this too. If you say it's not his fault, then I would go, well, that's not any better news for Intel. That means even Lisa Su couldn't save it, right? Like, at what point do we go, some of the stuff he's trying isn't working, and is that his fault? Or do you think Intel might just be like this oversized behemoth that is just going to be forced to constrict and nothing can save it?
One person cannot turn a company of that size around, yeah. It was different. You could say, it's unfair to say that Lisa Su was the only one that turned AMD around. I mean, you've got guys.
It's absolutely unfair. People get mad when you do that
as well. Obviously, you get Forrest Norwood. This was like, there's a lot of people turned AMD around. Nvidia are a bit kind of different. They seem to be like held together by the iron fist of Jensen. But Intel are just too big for one person to come, to change that company around. Which is another reason why they are downscaling. I don't have any real faith that Pat will be able to do it. In the end, though, it all comes down to products. It comes down to the manufacturing. There's been one or two things like in the past that made me think Intel might have something really, really special down the line in terms of manufacturing. Like really
I think they do, but I think it's down the line.
Yeah. I mean, it mostly came from a couple of Jim Keller videos that I've watched. And I know he was working on AI when he was at Intel, but he was also working a bit on fabrication as well and manufacturing. And some of the things he said made me think that, Moore's Law is not dead for a start. And Intel might have something really quick. It must be a new material or something. I mean,
Yeah, I don't remember if it was like an earnings thing or some press thing. They showed, I forgot what it was, but they showed some like new material being tested. And all of that, I just look at that and go, yeah, okay, in 2030, that'll be really cool, guys.
Yeah, 2030, basically. I think.
And do you think TSMC isn't trying to do this type of stuff, people? Like they're just sitting around doing nothing in their labs?
I think it's before 2030. I think this is coming before 2030. And another reason I think that is because Pat... you can tell a lot by what they say, and you can also dismiss a lot of things that Intel say when they say, like, yeah, our manufacturing's on target. We just automatically dismiss that as bullshit now. But Pat consistently says, or he uses the phrase, unquestioned leadership or something along those lines. And it's not just once he said this. This is multiple times he said this, and he's sticking to it. So I do think that, yeah, there's a chance that Intel might have something 2 to 3 years down the line that really brings them back into the game. Now, obviously, there's going to be
I think it's that Royal Core project, though, I think it's Royal Core, and I think it's what they're going to put into Arrow Lake, or at least Panther Lake. That is what I think. And I put out a Panther Lake early leak recently. all of it suggests that, God, where are we at now? I know to like reorient. Like Redwood Cove is coming. It's going to be a decent upgrade, but they have no issues with it clocking fast enough.
Yeah.
After Redwood Cove is Arrow Lake late next year. Hopefully, again, all of this is an Intel roadmap. That's supposed to bring a 30% IPC increase over Redwood, which has like a 7 to like 15% increase or something like that. So, like, or I think it's actually supposed to be at least 50% for Redwood. So, like, we're talking like 50% more IPC for Intel. Hopefully, about like 2 years from now, at least a 50% increase, and then Panther Lake's supposed to be 1 year later, another 30%. So they basically expect to double IPC in 3 years. And I suspect and I think there's something going on with like hybrid cores too.
Right.
Like, I think that's what he's thinking of maybe.
Right.
But when I hear that, I go, I think Zen 6 is going to be pretty strong too, though, guys.
Yeah.
I don't think, they're going to just screw around. So I don't know how much of that is just hubris, though. And this is easy to do and this is a problem I've run into. If I leak something 2 years ahead, they go, oh, Intel's dead or AMD's dead. It's like, well, remember, guys, they'll have something too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's just the way that he keeps sort of banging that same drum about unquestioned leadership, and what, Jim Keller, what I saw from his videos made me think, I mean, here's the thing. They might have another 30% IPC coming in 2 years, but if their manufacturing's still a disaster, then it's still no good. Everything needs to come together for Intel, for them to be rescued. If one thing goes wrong, then, they're still screwed. Whereas AMD and Nvidia are already there.
They can't have any more mistakes. They just can't.
Yeah. And it's the complete opposite with AMD and Nvidia, who are reliant on TSMC, who very rarely do anything wrong. And design-wise, Nvidia basically just keep on churning out more and more, better and better. And I think AMD graphics is slowly getting to that stage as well. So, yeah, I mean, the design is one part of it, 30% IPC, but if it's still a space heater inside the PC, it's not something I would be buying. If it takes 250 watts to compete, it's just... And it's just
remember, too, it's too soon to say what they'll push it to, but knowing Intel, I think it's supposed to be like 300 watts,
Yeah.
I think that's just where it's going, unfortunately, to be honest. Like, that's just what they're all doing now. Like, one of them did it, the other one thinks they have to do it, and if they both do it, well, you're going to lose by 10% if you're the one guy not playing the same game.
It's quite interesting that both Intel and Nvidia are feeling forced to do this because of AMD. Yeah. I mean, AMD, remember how inefficient it used to be, and then all of a sudden that changed with Zen, and they had real efficiency there. The only way for Intel to compete was to ramp up the power, ramp up the clock speeds. And now we see the same thing with Nvidia, Not only did they have to...
I think they're going to do it more next gen as well.
They will just keep on putting bigger and bigger shrouds on these cards. We could see 500 watts top end from them. Yeah, and it's not really where I want to see the PC going, in all honesty with you. Yeah, it's just it's not what I want to see. I would much rather just focus on a bit of efficiency. But then again, somebody has to win, and Nvidia can't lose. And if the only way that they can keep winning is by throwing power at the problem, that's what they'll keep on doing.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really annoys me, I don't really care if a company, and I have tested my 4090 in the benchmark rig over here at 550 watts. To be honest, it was hard to get it to use 550 watts in a game. The most it would consistently sit at is 460. It stayed cool. It's a liquid cooled card. Yeah. It made my room very warm. Yeah. I actually, what I did to test it is I think I booted up Battlefield, left it at the menu with my character standing there, and I just went to the grocery store and ran a few errands and then came back upstairs. And I was just like, so how hot is it in here? And it was pretty warm. Yeah. But it was able to cool itself. So I don't know. I think the limit's 600 watts just because that's when you're going to start breaking circuitry in the wall. But which is what I hear happen with a canceled NVIDIA card. I mean, they were blowing breakers in NVIDIA labs and had melted cards. Yeah. Like, I don't know. It's the funniest thing. So I think they've already found their limits, right? I don't mind if they push out a 500 watt card every gen, really. At least that makes there be a reason our PCs are so big. But I do have a problem with the 4080 being the same size. It's like, can we not do this to everything, though? Like, I get why the Flagship does. I might even get why a 4080 Ti is this giant hulking card, but man, this card is way bigger than it needs to be. I mean, they're probably going to consider pushing it harder, but that's the one thing that's annoying me is if we have 500 watt flagships, I don't care, but I will care if we have 400 watt mid-range cards. I will care. That's really going to piss me off.
You always used to know it was like one PCI connector, 150 watts, one 6-pin, yeah, and the mid-range you could say 2 6-pins at most. Maybe it goes to 225 watts or something like that. But now now the mid-range is 300 watts plus, and it's not. I don't want that in my PC. I just don't. Which is why the first thing I do is undervolt and underclock any graphics card I get hold of, so that it's not heating my room up. No.
I mean, I think I actually got through all the subjects I wanted to discuss here. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about any of these companies or really anything?
Off the top of my head, I can't really think anything. The only thing that really stands out for me is I seem to be one of the very, very few people who is impressed by RDNA 3. And I don't know if is it me? I mean, am I wrong for that? or is everybody else wrong?
Like gut check. Yeah. I don't know. There's so many launches where I feel... I almost felt the way you're feeling, but with Zen 4, I'm like, Zen 4 brought a bigger increase than Zen 3 gen over gen.
Yeah.
Zen 4 charged less money than the previous gen. And even the 7600X, I was like, I'm not saying they shouldn't have charged less. I think they should just to keep the new socket market share. Like, I think they should have. But, how many times when Zen 1 came out, did we see people, and especially Zen Plus, it's like, what is it, the 6-core, no hyper-threading i5? Yeah. People were comparing that to the 1600 and 2600X, and they're just like, well, sure, Intel's charging like $300 instead of $200. Sure, Intel gives you half the threads. Sure, Intel uses 50% more energy, but they win gaming by 10%, so it's okay because it's Intel.
Yeah.
And I looked at the 7600X, and I was like, AMD wins gaming, AMD uses less energy, AMD costs $30 less than the i5.
Yeah.
How is this not a better situation than what... And I think that's what AMD thought when they priced the 7600X at $300. Yeah. So like, we're better at like 3 out of 4 things. Can we not? No. Apparently people get mad if AMD isn't better at everything.
Yeah.
They have to charge less money.
And charge less money on top of that. I mean, it's been that way for as long as I can remember, in all honesty.
And I think they thought maybe now that they have Mindshare, it's not like that. It is apparently still like that.
Yeah. Well, the thing with Zen 4, I mean, some of the higher end stuff, I wasn't impressed with the pricing, as I mentioned. Zen 4 didn't do a thing for me. But then again, architecturally, it didn't really do anything for me. The big thing for Zen 3 was, of course, when they got rid of the cross CCX penalty, when they combined the cache. So architecturally, that did something for me, and I was impressed by Zen 3. Zen 4 didn't do enough for me. And maybe that's why I'm impressed by RDNA 3, because, they've done a lot architecturally, and as you said, they've landed it. And I can definitely see a big future for this series. Whether or not it happens, I don't know. And I know, look, the AMD fans are just sick and tired of waiting on this over and over and over.
Oh, the comments are going to be, here we go again, Tom and Jim telling us to wait for the next generation, which I'm not telling people to wait, right? But I think on your question, I tried to just make an analogy to Zen 4, where it was like, I was like, am I the only one who thinks that like it's impressive? I know it uses 170 watts, but Raptor Lake uses 350. Like, it's not impressive that AMD has the same performance for half the energy on a new node with all these? Okay, whatever, guys. I guess I'm crazy. I don't know. I can see your point with RDNA 3. I would just say the fact is AMD lied in a way that they usually don't, which makes it feel more insidious, I think.
Yeah.
And the fact is, it is obvious they failed, and they know they did. They know that they didn't intend to give you 67% more bandwidth and tie the 6950 XT in some games. You can see the bugs in 1440p. You would expect RDNA 3 to outperform the average in 4K. It actually doesn't. Yeah. To me, suggesting there's something wrong with the compute units, but the memory controller works great. Like, that's what I think, and I think everyone sees it. everyone sees AMD thought they had something better, then they lied and pretended they still did. And I think that's where all the negativity comes from. But, in my video yesterday, I said there's 4 different questions. There's, did AMD lie to us? Is something wrong? Do they have stronger stuff coming? And do I recommend it? And the 4th option is, well, I still think it's better than the 4080, I guess. So
yeah,
that's my thought. On its own, it's okay. But I think there's a reason people are mad. But if you just woke up and weren't aware of what they were trying to accomplish or didn't care about what they were trying to accomplish, I can see why you might be impressed. And I would 100% agree. Nothing changes about the fact that Nvidia went from 6 megabytes of L2 to 96 megabytes of, and they managed to make ray tracing better, but they didn't quadruple it for the amount of die space they're spending here. And AMD is half of this die on 6 nanometer, and yet it's performing 20% worse with 20% less silicon, and half that silicon's an inferior node.
Yeah.
And as penalties communicating.
Basically, yeah.
On paper,
chiplets are a drawback. Chiplets are a performance drawback. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think on paper, I 100% agree. I think it should be cheaper. It should have a different name, but relative to the 4080, it is a better card. And I think nothing's changed to what I think they've got coming in a couple years.
Yeah.
And the only thing I would resent to the trolls in the comment sections that will say, well, they're telling you to wait. I would say, well, we were fucking right about RDNA 2, though, guys. It did tie the 3090.
Yeah, true.
So you can't claim we're always saying the same thing.
Yeah.
This time, AMD just fell short, and it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, if you looked at it in terms of the falling short, which I don't, then yeah, obviously it would be very, very disappointing to be 25% behind the 4090 if that was their target. And that is all that they've got in the bag, and they intend to release nothing next year. We already know RDNA 3 Plus, whatever that is, we don't know quite yet what it is. But there's obviously something there that they're planning, a 3 Plus. And for me, this will be the telling moment for AMD's graphics division, probably for the next 5 years, I think. And yeah, it's true. We're always waiting on next year. We're always waiting on next year with AMD.
I know, and I hear myself, trolls. I know I sometimes sound like that, but I don't know what you want me to tell you. I'm sure. So it was wrong last time. I'm sure this time. And at the end of the day, we're not really guessing when we see those benchmarks on Tech Power Up that show 3.2 gigahertz. That tells you Navi 32 is probably going to be at 3 gigahertz.
Yeah.
That tells you that card's probably going to be awesome.
Yeah.
If they don't overcharge
if they don't overcharge.
And that tells you that there is gas in the tank for an RDNA 3 Plus. Like we've say though, if they go for it. They have to actually do it though. Yeah. But I think frankly, it's obvious that if they went from what they're at now, N5P to N4P, which is, or not even N4, N4P, which is really just a 6 nanometer to 7, what 4 is to 5. It's obvious if they go to N4P or who knows, an N4X kind of thing late next year, it's obvious they could get to 3.5 gigahertz, fix the bugs, and have something possibly 30-40% better than this. And the question is if Blackwell's even ready by then, because I kind of don't think it will be. And I don't, we're not promising anything, but I think the reason me and you remain optimistic is we see such an obvious path to another generation next year.
Yes. Yeah, okay. I mean, basically, that's exactly how I would look at it as well. Yeah, there is a very clear path to me. Power, the only problem I see is the power draw of the XTX, which it's a fixable problem. Yeah, and I too am also concerned that AMD doesn't go for it. That'd be my biggest concern, is that they just don't go for it, and instead RDNA 4 is already well in the works, which it will be. But they concentrate fully on RDNA 4 and miss an opportunity here to actually, if there is a big problem with bugs on RDNA 3, miss the opportunity to fix that and just actually win for a change, like a clear win. It's been so long since they were able to have a clear win. I mean, when was the last time? 10 years ago, maybe, that they actually won clearly. And that was only 6 months that lasted. It's been too long, yeah. So maybe there is a bit of wishful thinking there in my part, but yeah.
Well, I've had to come to terms with, I'm old enough to remember when they won, but 10 years ago is a long time. They're not the same company.
No,
so
not even close.
I mean, remember when the 4870 came out in like 2 weeks after launch. Nvidia dropped prices by 30%.
Yeah.
They're not doing that anymore, no matter what AMD does.
Yeah,
Like they are a
exactly.
different company now.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point as well. If you just look at it from the pricing perspective. Sadly, if AMD does win next year, and I expect it will, they're gonna price it as the winner, yeah. But then again, you're probably talking 50.
Maybe they'll learn their message. Maybe they'll learn a lesson, though. They're not going to be a charity.
No, obviously not.
But you never know. They might look at if sales collapse, if pricing is forced to be dropped. There's a chance the 8900 XT, or who knows if they keep calling it XTX, there's a chance they may keep it at 1,000 for one more gen or something if they feel like they botched this one.
Yeah,
which is why you should be hoping it doesn't sell, right?
Yeah, that's exactly why we hope that the XTX currently doesn't sell at $1,000, so that maybe they do learn a bit of a lesson there. And Intel are eating into their market share as well in graphics, as we saw from the recent John Peddy results. So, I mean, it's hard to believe that Intel would do that, but Intel have eaten into that market share, and I think AMD's at the lowest market share point in how long? As long as I can remember now.
I mean, in recent memory. Yeah. There's actually one more thing I want to bring up here, which is kind of on track with this. King Koru writes in and he says, how do you expect RDNA 3 to perform in Phoenix Point's iGPU? This is the 4 nanometer APU they're going to announce in like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think we're going to see out of that? Because honestly, Phoenix's integrated graphics performance with a monolithic 4 nanometer and actually 4 nanometer Phoenix, it might be very telling what's going on with RDNA 3.
I find it hard to get excited for like mobile chips and stuff like that. It's one of the areas that I have chosen to basically ignore. Yeah, I picked up that maybe, what was it, the Zen 4 IGP had a couple of CUs on that, and I thought, well, that
Phoenix has 12 CU. It's basically the same as what Rembrandt is, but it's RDNA 3 instead of RDNA 2, and it's on 4 nanometer.
Well, now, I mean, yeah, I can see how maybe that would be pretty decent. Yeah, 12 C, but then again, 12 CU's RDNA 3 is a lot less, isn't it, compared to RDNA 2?
Well, it's the same amount of CUs as Rembrandt.
Oh, it's the same, right? Okay. Yeah, I mean, wait and see basically on that one. It's not something that I'm really excited about. I don't know why. I just never really, I dislike laptops. I still dislike laptops. I use them for, I don't game on a laptop. I just find it just too fiddly. I don't like this. I don't like the keyboards. The screens are too small. I just don't game on a laptop. So I find it really difficult to get, excited for that kind of thing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, there were some ridiculous rumors that it would perform like a 3060, and I'm like, it won't.
No.
It's going to be, I think, maybe 6500 XT or something, or maybe a little better than that or something, maybe. But I would say, though, if it overperforms like a 6500 XT, that tells you whatever RDNA 3 is in Phoenix is overperforming what we got out of having 96 compute units in the desktop variant. That's the one thing I guess I'll be looking for, is if it hits the targets I heard for that, whereas Navi 31 didn't. Again, that would tell me RDNA 3's architecture itself might not be flawed. It might just be Navi 31.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly going to be interesting to see over the coming months when even Navi 32 may have fixed some of these problems. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see it. There has been a precedent, like I said. Tahiti had one or two issues which made it slow. Pitcairn fixed that like a few months later, and it was very, very power efficient in comparison. So there is a chance of that being the case. Don't get me wrong. There's definitely a chance of, and obviously we're talking different design teams working on these as well. Yeah. So,
and I hear the RDNA 3 variant in Phoenix is actually slightly different potentially too.
Okay.
So
is that a 3-part?
I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means it has a different teraflop pumping thing going on or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know yet, but I will say this though. Here's a hot take. I will bet Phoenix on 4 nanometer is more efficient than Raptor Lake Mobile on 10 nanometer.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be too many people disagreeing with you on that one.
I think that's going to be a pretty big bloodbath in mobile.
Yeah.
I mean, my God. Rough 2023 for Intel. But, that's all the subjects that I wanted to get to. So I'm glad we had a chance to talk about all this. I mean, it sounds like you're going to be more active, famous last words, but over the next few months.
As long as I'm interested in what's happening, then there's no reason why I wouldn't release a video on it. It's purely about the interest factor for me. It just went away. In between Zen 3, Zen 4, there was nothing there that really did anything for me. Ampere did nothing for me. In all honesty, Navi 20 didn't do a great deal for me either. I just felt like I just saw the prices going the wrong way, and AMD had already put Intel to the sword anyway, and Nvidia looked out of sight to me. The interest for me came when I looked at what RDNA 3 was bringing and the chiplets. And
they're finally doing it.
This was
what we knew they probably would.
This is what basically sparked my interest again. So there's no reason why I wouldn't continue to do so. Like I said, I intend to release at least one video this week, maybe even get a couple out, talking about the reviews and stuff like that, and maybe even another sort of looking to the future thing. What I don't want to do is bang the same drum about the 7950 XTX next year in case it doesn't happen, yeah? But I firmly believe AMD will launch a much larger chip next year. Absolutely. But I'm basically the only person saying that, so I don't want to be the one. I don't want people to be disappointed.
I think it's plausible based on what I'm hearing. It's just not like one of those things where it's like, oh, I've seen the document showing it,
Yeah.
So,
to me,
and it doesn't seem completely as firm as like a normal thing. It's certainly like they have an RDNA 3 Plus.
Yeah.
We know they can clock fast. There's a lot of evidence for why they would.
Yeah. I mean, if that does happen, then obviously I'm going to be very happy about that. If it doesn't happen, then, I was the one who predicted it and I was wrong about it. So that's just how that will go. I don't want to keep banging that point, but when you actually firmly believe, like, this has to go this way as far as I'm concerned. AMD has to do this, and I firmly believe it. It's not wishful thinking, but as we talked about, it's AMD, they might just decide not to bother anyway. And in the end, what can you do if that is what AMD's decision is? So I hope I don't keep on banging on that same drum. I'm definitely not going to choose it as a hill to die on, put it that way. This is not going to be the hill that I die on, but it's just something that I firmly believe will happen next year. And it's got me excited, yeah. Simply for the fact is, I just want to see Nvidia get beat. I want to see how Nvidia responds to defeat, yeah. This is the kind of thing
I can't imagine what current Nvidia would do, because
I think they almost lost
their minds.
They'll double down on ray tracing like you won't believe, same as tessellation. They will go nuts. But here's the difference though. The difference this time though is AMD has money to do it themselves. There's no reason why AMD can't be throwing money at game developers either. Both companies are running in about the same
and they're starting to. You look at their driver release cadence, they're getting there.
It's not the same AMD of 10 years ago. The same AMD 10 years ago simply didn't have the money, and they were left open to NVIDIA tessellation shenanigans and throwing money at devs like Hawks 2 benchmark and all that stuff. NVIDIA always had that in hand, but now they don't. They can still do it, but AMD can do it as well. So that comes down to, do they have the will to fight a battle like that as well? Like, do they want to actually start throwing millions at game devs?
And like you say, how does NVIDIA respond when their back's actually against a wall and they also have this much money? I mean, might we finally see, like an 850 millimeter squared HBM4 insanity? Like
something really
maybe and it's only going to happen if AMD really pushes them to not hold back.
Yeah, basically speaking, yeah. And I would say that I would believe what you suggested about NVIDIA going massive on 3 nanometers, like a huge die.
It's the only thing they can
do anyways,
anyways,
because it's the only thing they can do, yeah? And it'll be 500 watts or whatever.
And hey, look, if we say 3 nanometers 20% better than 5, which I don't think is an unreasonable thing, and then I multiply that by 800 millimeter squared divided by 620 or something, you get to about 50 to 60%.
Yeah, exactly. They're hitting about
They've got another one. Yeah. They can do it again.
Yeah, exactly.
They've got one more in them, I think.
Yeah, I think they have got one more in them as well. And but that is literally them at the ragged edge of every single thing they can do. They are at the reticle limit. They're at the power limit. They're at the biggest, the biggest coolers that they can slap on that. and they have literally nowhere to go after that. Nowhere whatsoever to go after that. Yeah.
Well, and I've seen MI3. I actually leaked what MI300's design is, and I've heard references to them testing Navi 31 and or just I should say RDNA 3 compute chips on that crazy 12 chiplet MI300 thing. You always wonder if AMD would actually try it. What if they got it working with RDNA 4 and they're just so we call this the 10990 XTX. It has 16 chiplets. It's 1,000 teraflops and it's 10 grand, but it beats Nvidia by 4 times.
Yeah.
So have fun, everybody. And then they just walk home. I don't even, and I had a renderer look into it. That would technically fit on a graphics card. So it would just be this big 3D stacked.
Realistically, you would look at twice the performance as the top they can meet, which is basically what they've done to Intel with chiplets. Yeah, they're twice as fast, basically. Right. Yeah, I would expect if they did do a proper GCD chiplet. This is a mega one. This is a completely different proposition from simply taking the cache and the I/O off die, though. Yeah, or sorry, the memory memory bus off die to go with actual graphics chiplet dies.
But I can confirm they are testing this crap with an MI300 base layer and then putting the gaming chips on top. The thing is, it's clearly not coming within a year, that crazy one.
Yeah, I mean,
but they're trying to make it.
The difference between doing compute dies for the market, for the data center market, this is completely different from graphics as well. Yeah, it's graphics is just a different load. There are so many, the amount of communication required between the chiplets there makes me think that this is probably a red herring, but we'll see about that.
The funny thing is, I didn't say anything like that's coming out. The funny thing is, though, is if they did succeed at making that, I almost wonder if they'd sell it, socketed it in its own motherboard pre-packaged. Because if this is a $10,000 gaming card, and again, everyone listening, I'm not saying this is coming out, but I'm just I almost wonder if it'd be worth it from a business perspective to only sell it themselves for 10 grand is the chip that games 4 times better than
almost
else.
Their own game console, basically.
Yeah. Because what's the point in letting them, in selling a $10,000 PCIe card, put Zen 6 on it, make it a giant MI300 APU, pre-packaged into the motherboard. You can choose your own RAM. And we're just going to sell it from AMD.com for 10 grand if you want undisputedly the best gaming chip on earth.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why they would bother selling that. I mean, can you imagine a Sapphire $10,000 card? They're not going to let Sapphire make that.
It would be interesting to see what they would do to their partners if they were as bad as what Nvidia can be with their partners. Obviously, EVGA and XFX, sorry. They also
who left Nvidia as well.
AMD just seem a little bit nicer in that regard when it comes to their partners. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the next gen consoles as well, though, because, they needed the consoles at that time just to keep the revenue ticking on. They don't need that anymore, AMD. And, consoles are eating into those wafers like nobody's business. Fortunately, 7 nanometer wafers now, but we saw how hard a time they had on 7 nanometers, even with Epic, because they just didn't have the wafers. There was so much demand. Nobody can buy a PS5 or an Xbox. So
you can now, actually.
Yeah, you can get them now. But I mean, how long ago was it they launched?
2 years.
2 years. Yeah.
They did launch during the GPU shortage. Though, so
yeah, and AMD and basically AMD had every single product on 7 nanometers at that point. Yeah. So the good news there is at least they've moved on to 5 now on everything, which is good for the graphics cards as well, because the graphics cards were the first thing to go on 7 nanometers, because those are the lowest priority product coming out of AMD. Yeah, even the consoles are higher priority than graphics cards. But now,
it will be interesting to see, because I don't think they are anymore. They're not. Those consoles just won't be. I don't think as high of a priority in terms of. I think that they can be very good and come out when they need to come out. Yeah. It's just I don't think AMD is going to charge bargain pricing for that this time, because they're the option. Yeah. Who are you going to go to? Basically. Come on, Tony, what are you doing?
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, you could say that AMD has joined Nvidia and Intel in their ability to sort of squeeze the customer yeah, which is disappointing. But they are a company, and it was obvious they would do that. They've gone that same way with their customers. It'll be interesting to see if they do it with their partners as well, if they actually found themselves.
That's the one thing I suspect they wouldn't, at least not right away.
Yeah, at least
but
not right away.
If they became NVIDIA, they probably would eventually. There's a reason NVIDIA is doing it.
They probably would. In fact, there's almost no reason to think otherwise.
Except for Jensen Huang. You never know if it's just him who doesn't accept anything but exactly what he wants.
It could well be. I mean, Lisa Sue's kind of ruthless as well, though. Yeah, she's got a kind of...
She's wearing leather jackets now, too, quite literally. I take it back. Yeah. I think they're from the same... I think they're related, right?
Yeah, apparently so.
Why would we assume she'd act any differently?
Yeah, basically, yeah. Same breed, so yeah, there's every chance. Same stock. Acting in the same way.
All right. I got to get these files to my editor so we can try to turn them around by the end of Tuesday. Mm-hmm. All of that content you're looking to make, it will be on the YouTube channel AdoredTV. There will be a link in the description, of course, for that for you guys to click on if you haven't heard of Jim.
Thank you.
And thanks to everybody for listening. Subscribe to Broken Silicon on your podcast app of choice. Tell your friends about us. Play it on loop 100 times on 10 different devices. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts. Support us on Patreon. All of the things are there. Links in the description to sponsors. Just thanks for listening again, everybody. And have a good holiday season, Jim. Thanks for coming on again.
Yeah, you as well, and all your viewers as well. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. And I'll catch you later, guys.
Cheers. This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law is Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it, and so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Full, AV, Anthony Greffa, Greg Pateki, Muhammad Akwari, Brett Jones, Aaron Close, J. Little Germany, Jan Rauner, Daniel Hyde, Treadbird, Ryan Riggleman, Dr. Foreman, Sam Miller, Deke, Thomas Rupp, The Mechanical Philosopher, Terrence Harrod, SNES Chalmers, Tom Bailey, Greg T. Wanchuk, Andrew S., Frank Zielinski, Daniel D., MJB1, Eric Jackson, Justice Brennan, Sammy Good, Velcom Alev, The Boss Haas, Nicholas Buckner, Spamroom G. Spantum, Lord Starstream, Jonathan, General Trips, Blake, Franco Frederic, Matthew Lazier, Jensen Wang, Nathan Moses, Zeries, Gregory Ecker, Dominique Koch, Jake Dude 23, Jake Martin, Cameron, Christian Lavoie, HardForroom.com, Original Ross, Licky, Lance Passler, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Christopher A. Butler, GZ Ziggy, Sarcastro, Stefan Hart, David Sebastian, Mead and Pork Stew, Tim Robb, Luis Correa, Ian Clifford, Jesse Jeskowiak, Travis Gooding, Holden Moley, Nan Yang, Chris Rich, Deepest Learners, Mad, Zutsu Taylor, Stephen Coates, Michael McGee, Chuck Glidden, Semi Malas, Greg, Trini, Patrick Go, Emmanuel Chief, Brett Summers, Milton, Tommy, Stephen Dick, Tommy, Kunden, Brucha, Mark Mitchell, McDavie, Delmaine Peterson, James N., James Anderson, Marshall Pierce, Mark Rainmaker, Dave Schultz, 3DS Boy 08, Hal Buma, Norithio, Matthew Landavazo, Stefan Koladik, Henry Zhang, Judson N, Brendan O'Connell, The Grid, Michelle Pell, E31337 Antics, Joseph Kelly, Noah Nicoela, Hexapuma, Chrysantine, Jerome Ferreira, Mayor, Keith Moore, Kita Abdul Kadar, Precision, DNA Tech, Nicholas Alexandra, Jean O'Shea, Royce Meyer, Charles Russell, Rujanine Ari, Slushbot, Teak Autumn, Jackson Miller, JSMMH, Neith Rizink, Mean Dean, Cal, Andre Zox, Gaiman Since Jeff Sedler, Jordan Simkovic, Loophole 35, Windstar, William Wealthy, James I. Rader, Corey Leonard, Nell Lima, John Shin, Justin Bussell, Kelvin, Austin Haggerty, Roger Davies, Shade, William Leaked, Corey Chappelle, Evan Dingle, C2, John Iverson, Samuel Park, Aaron, The Eternal Dreamers, Jansen Angima, Mark Central, Derek Lambine, Michael, Fours and Pours, Him Sagung, Robert Davidson, Space Channel 5, Beer Motor, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.